It's 1 o'clock, so we will start the Planning Commission meeting. This is July 13th, 2021 Douglas County Planning Commission. And I'll call the meeting to order. And we do have 6 Planning Commission members here. And Commissioner Kandel is on the call remotely. So Christy, I see your picture up there. If you could just acknowledge that you're here, and then we'll begin with the meeting.
Yes, Christy Kendall is here.
Thank you very much. Bryce, if you would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, we'll begin with public comment. Public comment will be taken on those items that are within the jurisdiction and control of the Planning Commission. Additional public comment periods may be allowed on individual agenda items at the discretion of the chairperson. It is requested that members of the public comment on those agenda items when they are considered. In addition to opening public comment will also be taken on each item listed on the agenda when they are discussed by the Planning Commission. We will also take closing public comment. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker on matters over which the Planning Commission has jurisdiction, supervision, or control. The Planning Commission wants to encourage the respectful consideration of all views by members of the public. If the content is willfully disruptive of the meeting by being irrelevant, repetitious, slanderous, offensive, inflammatory, irrational, or amounts to a personal attack or interfering with the rights of others, the comment will be terminated. The microphone for public comment is at the podium. You can press the face button, or the staff can turn that on when you have public comment. If when you begin your public comment you would print your name on the pad and state your name for the record, and then we'll begin the 3-minute timer. When the timer gets down to 30 seconds, it will turn yellow, and then when the 3 minutes has expired, it will turn red, and you should conclude your statement. So at this time, public comment is open on any matter within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Again, if you have comments on agenda item number 1 or agenda item number 2, we would ask you to hold those comments till we consider those agenda items. So if there are any opening public comments, please go ahead.
Jim Slade. Maps are important to nearly every issue that comes before the Planning Commission. Of course, those maps need to be accurate and readable to fulfill their purpose of informing both the Planning Commission and the public as to what they are portraying. I pointed that out a few months ago that the new maps that the community development was using failed in both goals, being neither accurate nor readable, and were far worse than the previous maps that staff presented. There was some agreement that this was the case, some mention of a new program being used by GIS, and a promise to make them better. Sadly, that has not happened, which is a disservice to you and the public. Regardless of who creates the map, it is up to community development to make certain that they serve their intended purpose. While the comments I make here are general and don't address the substance and factors of any agenda item today, it will be helpful if you look at a recent map. So I would recommend that you look at the map on page 136 of today's packet, a zoning map of the area around Buckeye and Muller. On that map, the subject parcel alone shows 4 different shades of green. The key shows 3 green colors, each a tiny 2 millimeters by 4 millimeters, one being A19, one RA5, and one RA10. It is difficult to tell which of those zoning districts apply to the 4 different greens on the parcel map. Making matters worse, there are 4 or 5 other shades of green nearby. The purpose of this map is supposedly to inform us as to the zoning of the subject parcel and the other nearby parcels, but it is impossible to do so from that map. The adjacent parcels to the east and north, on the other side of Muller in 3 shades of gray, are marked light industrial, though rural industrial appears in part of the gray area to the east. SFR 8000 appears in 5 places on the west side of the map, but on top of 4 different color parcels. only one of which is SFR 8000 in the key. The purple parcel is not identified at all, though the key indicates that it is a public facility. Would it have been too difficult to identify it as a public facility? The Minden Elementary School, which might be relevant? Maps are supposed to make the planning commissioners and the public better informed about the nature of the subject parcel and other nearby parcels. This map does just the opposite, making us all more confused. Community development needs to do a better job with all their maps. And don't blame it on GIS. This is your work product, and you need to make sure that it serves its intended purpose.
Thank you very much. Is there additional opening public comment? Seeing no additional opening public comment, we'll close opening public comment and we'll move to the approval of the agenda. This is for possible action, approval of the proposed agenda. The Planning Commission reserves the right to take items in a different order, to combine two or more agenda items for consideration, and to remove items from the agenda or delay discussion relating to an item on the agenda at any time. We do have two items on our agenda today. And I would also allow allow public comment on the approval of the agenda if there is anyone from the public who would like to comment on the approval of the agenda today. If there's no public comment on approval of the agenda, then I would bring it back to the Planning Commission for approval of the agenda and a motion.
So moved.
Maureen moves approval of the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Mark seconds approval of the agenda. Is there any discussion on approval of the agenda? Seeing no discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of approving the agenda, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to approval of the agenda? Hearing no opposition, then the agenda is approved 7-0. We'll move on to approval of the minutes. This is for possible action, approval of the draft minutes of the Planning Commission, April 13th. 2021, and approval of the draft minutes of the May 11th, 2021 meeting. We did postpone the April 13th minutes as they were a little bit jumbled at times. We have corrected those in the interim. We did not have a June meeting, so we would be approving the two minutes from the April 13th and the May 11th meeting. I'll again call for any public comment on approval of the minutes of those two meetings. And as I've said in the past, I do this because in some cases, members of the public may have been misquoted in the minutes, and I do want to offer that opportunity for any member of the public who made a statement at either of those meetings and was not properly recorded. So if there's public comment on approval of the minutes, please come forward. Seeing no public comment on approval of the minutes, I would bring it back to the Planning Commission for a motion to approve the minutes of those two meetings.
So moved.
Maureen moves approval of the two minutes on April and May meetings. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mark seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on approval of the minutes? Seeing no discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to approval of the minutes would vote nay. So in this vote, the votes are 7 in favor and none against. So both of those minutes are approved. We'll now move to the first agenda item. This is on page 102 of the packets, and I'll read this into the record. This is for possible action, discussion on a request for a major variance to reduce the required 30-foot side yard setback to a 10-foot setback for a proposed carport and deck located at 1248 Tamarack Drive in the R64 zoning district in the Tahoe region. The applicant is Alan Mansfield Masterfield Construction, LLC, representing the owners, Jason and Yolinda Rose. This is APN 1418-34-210-002, development application DP 21-0146. Lucille, you will be doing the staff presentation, and I'll remind everyone that the procedure we'll usually follow is that the staff will make a presentation. We will then have the applicant make any comments they wish to make. We'll then move to questions from the Planning Commission for the staff or the applicant. Then we'll follow up with public comment on the agenda item. And then the Planning Commission will take action on a motion. So, Lucille, go ahead and start your presentation, and
Thank
then
you.
we'll move to the applicant.
Thank you, Chairman Walder. Lucille Rayo for the record, Community Development. We'll start with the background. There are two types of variances, major and minor variances for setbacks. A minor variance is 20% or less. A major variance is greater than 20%. Minor variances can be approved administratively by the director. Major variances must go before the Planning Commission. Planning Commission must must meet the findings. Title 20, Section 2606050B contains the findings required by Planning Commission to approve a major variance. Subject parcel is within the Lake Ridge Estates subdivision map number 1. It was recorded in 1957. On the map, there are specific setbacks that were determined for each parcel. The house was built in 1980 per the assessor's database, so it can be concluded that the intention for the setbacks was a way to determine the location of the homes on each parcel. It would be reasonable to say that the setbacks may have afforded owners with potential views and perhaps distances between structures to create a more spacious and private environment. For the subject parcel, the setbacks shown on the final subdivision map are set at 30 feet on the westerly property line. The request is for a 10-foot setback, resulting in an approximately 33% reduction in the setback. Mr. and Mrs. Rose reached out to their neighbors and the HOA. The staff report contains 11 letters in support of the variance, including the HOA, which is also the Architectural Review Committee. Those approvals can be found as Attachment 6 on packet page 122. It's important to note that Douglas County Code Section 2702030.3 states the side yard setback is a minimum of 7 feet from the property line to the foundation wall. That's what code requires. It's not what's on the map. So we're talking about what's on the map today. This applies in areas of Tahoe that do not have setbacks included on the final subdivision map. Here's a vicinity map of the parcel. The parcel is located west of Highway 50 along Tamarack Drive. It's the highlighted blue parcel that you see on that slide. The zoning is RO64, and as I stated earlier, in the RO64 zoning district, if they were not in a subdivision that had setbacks already set on them, they would be allowed to have a 7-foot setback in the Tahoe area in this zoning district. This slide is a picture of the Lake Ridge subdivision map. The star is the parcel. The yellow circle represents the 30-foot setback. Sorry. It's a little sensitive. So we have the parcel here. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Here's the site plan of the request. The one on the left is the entire parcel. The one on the right is the request zoomed in. As you can see, we highlighted the setback at 10 foot for the proposed deck and carport. Staff went out to the site. We took photos. This is the entrance to the driveway. It kind of loops around to the right. The photo to the right is the area where the request is for the deck and carport. They do have 2 existing garages, and there is a current deck now. The photo on the left is a fence that illustrates basically where the deck and carport would go to. Their property line does extend beyond the fence. And as you can see, there is a neighbor that is to the west of the property, and it's sort of a slightly sloping, so it's a little bit down from in elevation from the proposed deck and carport. Findings have to be met in the affirmative pursuant to Douglas County Code Section 2606050B. Planning Commission may not approve a variance unless All of the following findings are made in the affirmative. Those findings can be found on packet pages 105 to 106, and staff does not believe the findings can be made in the affirmative to approve the major variance. Staff is recommending denial of application DP 210146, a variance to the west side yard setback from 30 feet to 10 feet for a proposed carport and deck for Alan Mansfield representing Jason and Yelena Rose, located at 1248 Tamarack Lane, based on the inability to make the required findings. If the Planning Commission votes to approve the variance request, staff recommends all conditions applicable to the project are included in the approval. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Lucille. I think we'll hold the questions until we've heard as well from the applicant. And if we can get the sound turned up maybe just a little bit, that might help everybody here. I'm not sure if the mics, that might help. I think we're getting there. Are the applicants Jason and Yolinda Rose, or the applicants' representatives here and would like to make a presentation? Okay. You can handle it however you'd like. You can have your representative.
Drive. We are kind of set pretty far back away from the road. We're also offset to our neighbor's house that is subject to that 30-foot setback currently. There is also a set of trees that have grown up between us and the house that are, as you can see in that picture, probably, 20, 30 feet tall, that we plan on maintaining and keeping as a measure of privacy between us and the deck. So we've already been through all the work with TRPA. So TRPA has actually already approved the project overall. As the commissioner mentioned, far back from the road, so from a neighbor. The existing deck is within that. Nice. It does not impact, take care of the shoveling. So when you're trying to take garage, obviously that's a challenge and hardship. And then, the other element is due to the shape of to put a covering to support those vehicles. There's just no other space available. So this is really our only option to accommodate something. Mentioned, we do have all of the letters. I know it doesn't necessarily meet all of the 3 requirements in the major variance. However, in kind of looking at the timing, going back to 1957 when those trees probably didn't exist. Foundations and structures of the homes are in place. We're not looking to simply looking to do is just extend that deck out over our current driveway to provide a little bit of additional outdoor space for our family, as well as the coverage for the vehicles to prevent the
Thank you very much, Mr. Rose. Does your wife or Mr. Mansfield want to speak or have any additional comments?
Hi, my name is actually Alan Masterfield. I'm the owner of Masterfield Construction.
I
hit the neighborhood and see what's been done to make it as easy, accessible, and safe as possible. That's why we had to push it out just a little bit into that variance to get it down to that, say, maximum, minimum 10 foot. We don't want to go below that. We don't want to extend it out any further. And we feel at that point we can get it within inside that variance if we could get that passed. Everything else is going to be built is going to look just like the home. It will match existing. So basically, anybody driving by, it will look like it's always been part of the home. You'll never notice there's any difference. It is very well hidden from the street and other views. We did take a walk around to try to see from other neighbors' point of view where this deck is, and like Mr. Rose had stated that the other house is actually down the hill from it. You know, it's down the hill, and it's also offset. So when they are looking outside their front door, it is not a part of their, say, scenery. It is more on their driveway part of the scenery of them. And we have talked with neighbors, and they all confirmed that it would be okay if they didn't mind to have that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Masterfield. We'll come back to the Planning Commission then for questions. I would remind the members of the Planning Commission that we are the sole authority on this, so this would not go to the Board of County Commissioners unless there was an appeal of the action we took. So we would be voting to approve or deny the application. Christie, I can't necessarily see when you want to speak, so if you'd like to ask questions at this point, we can go to you, or we'll take questions from members of the Planning Commission first.
No questions yet.
Okay. Whenever you feel like you've got a question, just jump in. I'll turn it over to members of the Planning Commission for questions of either staff or the applicant. And if Mr. Masterfield or Mr. Rose, if you'd like to even stand at the mic, when you stand at the mic and speak, try and get a little closer to the microphone. The sound doesn't carry too well when you're standing a little further away. But members of the Planning Commission, questions for the staff or the applicant? Brian?
Hi, Brian Olin. For the construction, you said you walked the neighborhood. Did you notice any other similar variances within the Lake Ridge Estates that you can speak to?
We did. I'm sorry. We did. We actually, I had my office staff do the same type of overlay you did, and we did it with theirs. We've seen in one of the cul-de-sac, if you look at the association, there was a cul-de-sac down there. They had the actual garage was no more than 2 feet off the road. There was absolutely zero driveway. So they had gotten, under my impression, because I don't know exactly what their zoning was there, but my impression was you got to have at least a 10-foot driveway to park a car. Their garage was literally right on. We try to get our laser as close as possible to see some of the other variances or other setbacks that were off. And we actually found 17 that, from what we could see on our overlay and what we went out there and tried to measure from without crossing property lines or getting onto people's property, we found 17 different items that we thought were inside the setback.
And then my follow-up question would be for Lucille. When we say that circumstances do not apply generally to other properties in the same land use district, how many homes are in that land use district? How many of them have the 30-foot setback, and how many of them conform to county code at the 7 or 10?
I'm not aware of any variances since I've been with the county for 16 years in Lake Ridge. I did do a search, and I didn't find any variance requests. So I can't speak to what they're saying. I mean, I would think that you would have to do a survey to know if the house was or was not extending into the setback.
Would that not be something we have recorded in the county
Yeah,
as
sure.
to anybody that would be? But when I say in the land use district, so Lake Ridge Estates that's the entire land use district. That doesn't apply to the people across the road or people down the road in Douglas County. There is no other people included in that land use district.
So you're talking about the RO64 zoning district?
Correct.
There could be other variances in that land use district.
And so back to the original question,
yeah.
do we have an idea of how many homes are in there and how many are required to meet the 30 feet versus the regular county code? Because I feel like we have an HOA here that is like many of the HOAs I see around here where they correct stricter rules than what the county enforces, not necessarily considering anything other than themselves. They don't consider any future owners or any visitors or anything, and these HOAs create problems more often than they solve them. So when I'm looking at this, we have a 30-foot setback, whereas the rest of everybody else, from right now, I can't tell if anybody else has a 30-foot setback, if Lake Ridge is the only one from this conversation.
So in the Lake Ridge subdivision on that map, correct, there are setbacks just for that subdivision itself. So you can say in favor of them that the HOA was in favor of approving or agreed with the variance. So they're okay with the variance, so is the Architectural Review Committee, so are a number of neighbors. But if...
Well, yeah,
but-
I wanted to use numbers to actually figure out how many people are like Lake Ridge, but when we don't have anything comparable, say that this doesn't apply to other general properties in the land use district, I don't see any evidence other than Lake Ridge itself. And so when I'm saying that we don't apply to the same land use, let's expand the land use to everyone included in the land use, and let's put some statistics on it. I mean, 30-foot setbacks, we should know the number of homes.
Right.
The number of homes in the land use districts, probably recorded in the county, an easy number to get, and how many are at 10. I mean, these are things that I think we should know, and I think a disservice is provided to these people when we don't actually use comparable information, and we're sticking to just what's in front of us.
Right, so we were looking at the subdivision map, right.
Brian, you're making some very good points. I think Sam Booth might have something to add on this, and I can possibly interject as well, but go ahead, Sam Booth.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would agree with what Lucille said, and this is Sam Booth, Deputy Director of Community Development for the record. Brian, to your point, the land use or the zoning applies to many properties in Tahoe, many other subdivisions. But as Lucille pointed out, the specific standards that we're talking about on this application only apply to the Lake Ridge subdivision. So to the discussion or point that, what are those setbacks in some other areas? What we're strictly looking at here are the 30-foot setback that's required per this subdivision map. Of course, there is some age to it. As we've discussed, this map was approved in 1957. My guess is, as far as the nature of construction since 1957 to today, there could be, some changes to construction practices over time. But Lucille said she's reviewed, there aren't any variances that were approved in there. But just as far as what other areas, I think you were quoting the finding, what other circumstances or conditions would generally apply. Those circumstances in other subdivisions would be different because they would have different set of setbacks within there. So we're strictly looking at Lake Ridge subdivision. Again, Lucille touched on this in her presentation. By the nature of Title 20, the county's development code, the side yard setback is just 7 feet. And so their request does meet our county code. What it doesn't meet is the established setback for their subdivision, and that's the need for the variance.
And so it goes back to what I say, is HOAs create rules stricter than the county, and isn't it the county's job to maybe say, HOA, you're being a little bit too strict? I mean, I would think as our job as planning commissioners is to review those of the lower decisions and make an overriding decision in the instance that they're being too strict. When I read number 2, it does not say other properties within Lake Ridge subdivision. It says land use district, and that is bigger than Lake Ridge. And so I think even though we're restricting this, we're limiting our scope on this view as to whether or not it applies to everyone. I mean, I would think if we could pull up the total number of homes and we look at it, I'd say that there's a larger number of homes within the 10 than there are at the 30. And I think we're creating an extra barrier for anybody that decides to live there. And yes, you live there and you should know it, but at the same time, was the HOA right in making the decision in the first place? I think something that no one will ever review, and who is? And I think it's the overarching, people's decision to at least take a review of those types of conditions that these HOAs place. I audit more HOAs than probably anybody in this room and deal with them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So, I can see the things that these people do and the meetings and such that happen within them, and I have to say that they create more problems than they ever solve. And so in this instance, I'm looking at somebody that's, an HOA, and they are within the HOA, but did the HOA do everything right in the first place? And I have no numbers to back up whether or not they did. And so my research did not prove as well because I'm not as good at the maps and have the information you guys have at your hands, but maybe I should ask you guys a little sooner. So I apologize for not bringing your attention and putting you on the spot, but, so I think it's information that if we can include it, we can talk about it.
Thank you, Brian. Other members of the Planning Commission with questions for the staff of the applicant? Bryce?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lucille, was there an opportunity for the applicant to meet with you all and talk about this prior to the decision being rendered, did they have a chance to kind of express what they've expressed to us today? Or did they submit and then a decision was rendered?
Thank you, Chairman Klutz. I'm sorry, Member Klutz. From the research I did, an application was brought in for a building permit in January, and then it was caught at the counter that it wasn't going to meet setbacks for the subdivision map, and I believe Lorenzo Mastino had met with or spoke with Mr. or Mrs. Rose on the phone, correct me if I'm wrong, and explained the process that they were going to need a major variance. Other than that, I mean, did I call them up and explain that I was going to be denying? No, I did not. We sent them the staff report.
Thank you, Bryce. Other members of the Planning Commission? Nick, go ahead.
A couple of questions. What jurisdiction does the HOA have over setbacks? I mean, at this point, any? Or are we still dealing with a subdivision map that was done in 1957?
Member Meyer, this is Sam Booth, for the record. It was just discussing with Sam Taylor, but our determination early on in this, as Lorenzo reached out to the property owner, and as Lucille had been doing her review, is that the county commissioners approved the subdivision map back in 1957. So when the county approved that subdivision map, essentially the county endorsed those setbacks. That the developer, of course, as Brian had mentioned, had proposed those setbacks originally, but once the county voted and approved that subdivision map and it was recorded, now those are the setbacks that we have to adhere to.
Okay. And what then would be the process for the HOA to bring forth the subdivision map and change the setback requirements for the entire subdivision?
That's a good question and a good point, Member Meyer. This is Sam Booth again. I believe we have discussed with the property owners, but another option to a variance could be submitting an amended subdivision map and recording an amended subdivision map with revised setbacks, potentially for each parcel or maybe just this parcel in particular. The tricky point for the property owner in doing that is that on the owner's certificate on that map that gets recorded, every owner within the subdivision would have to sign that certificate and approve of that.
Okay. So that's a possibility where the entire subdivision could address this particular issue. Okay.
That's true, yes.
Another question is, how much are they over from a minor variance to a major variance? I mean, how far out of bounds are they? What kicked them to a major variance versus a minor variance? Could they just cut back the deck a little bit and get to a minor variance?
Member Meyer, yes, they can reduce it. 20% or less is a minor variance. I believe that was discussed with them. The problem is that the posts for the deck would be in the way of the car getting in to the driveway or swinging around towards the garage. I think it's a matter of logistics.
You mean
for them.
it wouldn't go out far enough?
Correct.
The post would inhibit them from actually getting into the
Correct.
garage?
We discuss every application that comes in, and we try to think of ways to make this work. I mean, there's other ways of doing it. Can they cantilever a deck? Yes. What's the engineering involved in that? I have no idea. It's probably more involved than just putting the posts there, so. Yes, is there an option for that? I would imagine yes.
Okay, thank you. And to the owner, do you have the support from your neighbors on both sides of you and in back of you?
We do. So we have support from the immediate neighbor just down the hill that was in the photographs Lucille presented. We have approval from the neighbor directly across Tamarack Drive from us. That would be most proximate. And then behind us is actually a forest land lot, so there's no house directly behind us that then goes up onto 50. So the neighbors on the other side, which, by the way, that deck is fully facing the other direction, so they wouldn't see it anyways. But we also went up and we got signatures from a number of people that are right on 50 directly across the highway from us as well.
Okay. My only concern with approving this is just the precedent that it will set. And, I don't know if this is going to open up a flood of people coming into planning now, wanting major variances because they're dealing with something that is a subdivision map from 1957. So, I don't think our planning department wants to go through individual applications like that. So I'm trying to figure out some way to get this particular subdivision to update its setback requirements for everyone in that division to streamline the process for planning and the planning commission.
Right. And maybe, to address that, I think Mr. Olin was making some great points around. Interestingly, our neighbor that is pictured in that image is 7 to 8 feet from the property line. They actually don't have a 30-foot side setback. So the 30-foot side setback isn't a universal element of the Lake Ridge subdivision. It actually only applies to the lot that we're on. There may be others in the subdivision that potentially have a 30-foot setback, but like literally, I don't have the aerial view of the subdivision and where the houses are, but if you go down by the lake, you can reach out your hand between the houses on the lake and touch the two of them, right, or along the lakefront, which is also part of the same subdivision. And then our neighbor's house is literally 5 foot from the property, 5 to 6 foot. We haven't done a survey, but they're like literally almost right on the property line with their house. Like, I'm not even talking about a deck, I'm talking about the corner of their foundation. So again, it feels like a very unusual thing that I think, again, when the original folks back in 1957 laid out the subdivision, I can't speak to what their thought process was, but it wasn't uniform. It wasn't like we're going to put 30-foot setbacks throughout this community and everybody's going to have all this space. I'm pretty sure you could pull the map and look at the setbacks of all the neighbors. This one's actually pretty unusual. So while I respect, the thought about precedent and everybody wanting to come in and do something, this is, I feel like, kind of an unusual case where it's not universally applied. It's like just this one property that has it. Yep. And, if you look at the property, our stairs that come down from the existing deck probably go into that setback already. So I'm not sure how that factors into this, and then certainly our driveway is well into that setback, because again, all we're trying to do is go over top of an existing driveway. We're not looking to add any additional coverage beyond where we're already parking vehicles and having kind of where we're already living and using the space.
Well, then this brings up another question of enforcement of the existing code. It sounds like everybody did their own thing regardless of what the code was up there. So was this a responsibility of the HOA, or was this a responsibility of the county? It sounds like a lot of building went on up there that was not code, and it doesn't even meet county code. So, I don't know, does community development have an answer on that?
Thank you, Nick. You made a lot of good points. I think the question is, and I can amplify this a little bit. Lake Tahoe and the areas that are built there in their each individual communities, the rules and regulations vary tremendously. Some have HOAs, some do not have HOAs. Some have architectural standards, some do not have architectural standards. In many, many cases, the lots were not surveyed. People just built wherever they felt like building. I don't know that the community development was even existing when some of these things were done. Right. And going back to Brian's point, variances, I think, again, people put fences where they wanted to put fences. People put their driveways where they wanted to put their driveways, back in the 50s and the 60s and even into the 70s. So I don't know how much retroactive action community development could take or would want to take. I think the attitude in Tahoe in many cases is, well, it's okay, nobody's getting hurt by this or by that. But I do agree with the points that other people have made. We should have good standards. We should have good regulations. We should have appropriate setbacks. There's a reason for rules and regulations. So I don't know if Sam Booth, you wanted to add anything else to the role of community development in policing the standards that are currently being set and what has previously been done, or whether we want to just leave that as a unanswerable question. But you raise a very good point, Nick.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. This is Sam Booth. To the point that, over time, as we've said, since 1957, there could be some non-conforming structures that don't conform with our existing code, that the development code was approved. We've had several iterations of the development code since 1957, so those standards by the county may have changed over time. That could contribute to the issue. But what I could say for today, and to your point about current construction, any building permit that's submitted, we would review against the code standards. And as Lucille and Lorenzo pointed out, that's why we're here today. The applicants submitted a building permit and proposed this, and it was staff that caught the issue and pulled the subdivision map and saw the setbacks there.
Very good points, Nick. Anything else that you wanted to ask for questions? Mark, would you like to go ahead and ask questions next?
Sure. So this is for Lucille. So Lucille, do we know how many total lots are in this subdivision? I mean, we have letters from 14 that say it's okay, but how many total lots are there?
Looks to be about 25 or 26
Okay.
when I'm counting on the map here.
And then I know that Tahoe Douglas Fire District has to approve this. Do they have the authority to actually say, you know what, this might cause a fire hazard and we're not going to allow you to pull a building permit? How does that work administratively?
When they apply for a building permit, they have to also submit to the fire department, and so they would have to get approval from the fire department before the building permit could be issued.
Okay.
Mr. Masterfield, did you?
We filed with the fire department and have gotten our approval. So we have approval from the TRPA, fire, and then we're here in front of Douglas County.
For the record, Jason Rose, and from the GID Architectural Committee as well. So the actual HOA approved this as well.
Thank you. Other questions, Mark?
Did we receive any reports from a subdivision owner that was against this?
We only received letters in support. I did receive a visit from the next door neighbor early on. She was concerned. She said, I signed the letter saying I was okay with it. She goes, and I thought about it, so I really want to come in and see what they're doing. I showed them the file on what they were doing, and I said if she had anything else to say, she could email me, call me, come to the meeting. I have not heard from her and her husband since they visited me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Brian, did you have other questions, or Maureen or Christy, if you're willing to? Brian is going to go, and then Maureen, and then Christy, you would be after that if you have questions.
So again, for staff, and maybe Lorenzo's not a good person to answer this, but in my past, when I get up here for these variances and I see by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of the property, I think I remember in the past, the staff response was it's in Tahoe. I mean, not that short, but pretty much most lots in Tahoe have these weird angles and things like that. And yet we're saying that there's no peculiar exception or practical difficulties, and our men up here describe that there's differences in all the different parcels within even just this single HOA, let alone the rest of the area. So, I'm having trouble with us pulling a full 180 here, and the other thing is I've rarely seen a TRPA approval come in front of us to which we were arguing against. I mean, not to say that they have anything to do with the boundaries of the zoning and things like that. They're more concerned with lake clarity and, construction and green or whatever you want to call it. But, I think they put it through a pretty rigorous process, and to take their yes lightly, I mean, I think, even they probably are looking at this with a similar light in how come this property is so different than the one that's right on the line right next to it? I mean, 3 houses down, that house is, like he said, on the line. Even one other area, I see a structure or something that seems to even split the line, but maybe that's 2 people that have things back to back. So, when I'm looking at this on our number 1, we're saying that there's no exceptional differences, and I have trouble with agreeing with that one. It's almost a full 180 of anything I've ever seen under that single, exception on any of the other Tahoe homes. So I'm wondering what's the thought process as to why we don't apply what we apply to all the other properties in this instance, and I feel like we were really short-sighted. So, in looking at this number 1, please describe how, the fact that we have all these different things going on within even just this HOA, they don't meet number 1.
Sam
So-
Booth?
I'm sorry,
Excuse
do you
me,
want me to answer
Lucio.
that?
Sam Booth, did you have something that you need to jump in on?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Sam Booth again for the record. Brian, to your points, I think Lucille could speak for herself, but staff did struggle with making a recommendation on this. The Planning Commission doesn't hear, easy cases. We handle those in the office that, if we can, or at the front counter when a building permit's submitted. So this is a very tough call. I think in that finding that you're referencing there, I think it could be the case that there is an exceptional shallowness, narrowness, conditions to this potential property. The rest of that finding goes on to read that there's also an undue hardship. And so as staff was reviewing the application, we were trying to find what the undue hardship was there. And it was, I think, just breaking it down to its simplest form was that the homeowner has a 2-car garage today. He has covered parking. And of course, we heard their comments in their submittal that they were requesting additional area of coverage for snow. But, is there a hardship that they don't have covered parking and they needed a place to park a car? There are many homes at Tahoe that don't have parking. I think we might have looked at it a little bit differently if there wasn't a garage and they were trying to, to add that. But this is an additional space out beyond the garage. And that there is an existing deck today, that's in that area. However, again, this isn't an easy issue. The contractor and the applicant have described, there's a very tight turn into the property with their driveway. I think you're kind of coming down the hill off of 50. They have to make a tight swing in there. So, we leave these things up to the Planning Commission, and as I said, some of these tough issues come to you guys. It's because we have a hard time making a call on it as well. I think just when staff was looking at it, we said, what's the hardship here? That there is already additional covered parking on the property.
Thank you, Sam. Anything else you wanted to follow up with Brian, or should we move to Maureen? Go ahead.
Well,
Go ahead.
I mean, to follow that up, I think, again, we're ignoring the hardship that's at place is the fact that he's got different setbacks than everybody else around him. And for him to have to be 30 feet from the property line when the 48,000 residents here are 10 feet, I mean, I'd say, COVID caused 1% and, is 1% enough? Or what do we put a number on where the hardship exists, where you're different than everybody else? And so, I just have trouble with saying that there isn't a hardship because he's different than everybody else, and where he wants to put it would normally meet the rules. And in this instance, because normal doesn't work, I think that's where our hardship exists. I think, again, when we look at the slides, we say that it's a 33% reduction in the setback when it's 67%. We're taking off 20 feet of 30 feet. That's 67% gone, not 33% gone. Why do we have to take such a big chunk to get to normal? I mean, to me, that's what's wrong in this instance.
Thank you, Brian. Maureen, go ahead with questions that you want to make at this point.
We were were told by the applicant and their representative that they have approval from TRPA and the fire district, yet it says after the variance is granted, if the variance is granted, they have to submit a written approval. So there is a chance, if we grant the variance, that it could come back that TRPA and the fire people may not approve these plans. Is that correct?
They do have approved plans from TRPA. That is in our system. That was what was submitted with the building permit in January. I cannot speak to fire. I don't know. They said they brought it to fire, but I haven't seen anything in regards to fire department approval.
Okay, because I don't see that in the packet, the approvals. So that's a concern to me. And also in the letters from the neighbors saying, we support this, I think I would feel better about the HOA approval letter if it was not on a form letter that was sent by all the other neighbors. If it was a letter that was written and sent by the Lake Ridge Architectural Review Committee on their own letterhead and not just stamped at the bottom of this form letter. And HOAs, as I recall, all they do is enforce the HOA rules. They have no jurisdiction, if I'm correct, Sam Taylor, over anything other than HOA rules. They have no jurisdiction over county rules or any other things dealing with code, correct?
Yes, Sam Taylor for the record, Douglas County DA. HOA rules do not trump, county code when it comes to setbacks and what have you. And also something else I think is important to note for the record, and it's something that I think is a little bit misleading. If you look at the map, there are setbacks within that subdivision up to 60 that I've seen. There are 40-foot setbacks, and it appears to me that the way that the developer did this, he was trying, they were trying to basically align where the building envelopes would occur on each individual lot. I'm not sure what the underlying purpose is, of course, because the map is so old, but probably to maximize views, to maximize sort of spacing between the houses so their sight lines are not impeded, which is often the case when you do these types of setbacks and have this type of map. So again, I can't speak to why they were doing it, but those setbacks do exist. And again, there's 50-foot setbacks, 30-foot setbacks. There's a 30-foot setback, I think, to the east on their property as well. So I just wanted to note that for the record. Okay.
Are we going to have public comment on this? Okay, I'll reserve my other comments until after that.
Thank you, Maureen. Christie, did you have questions you wanted to ask now? I have just a couple of short ones, but I'll defer to you if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I had a couple comments or questions.
Go ahead.
I think in listening to what Sam just said, while the different properties have different setback requirements and some could exceed the 30 feet, I think that if we were to approve this, that just granting this major setback variance doesn't necessarily set a complete precedent for the other parcels, because the findings that we would have on this would be specifically related to a driveway and parking. So we could separate it out to where someone couldn't just build another addition to their house for no reason by us already, I guess, setting this precedent. So, for finding one and agreeing with Brian that, Tahoe really does always mean there's exceptional challenges. And I would argue that, in 1957, when this was recorded, the size of the vehicles that people drove are completely different than they are today. So having vehicles that you have in Tahoe, when I believe our code requires garages for any new building, but yet if we have vehicles in today's world, 60 years later, that can't fit into these garages, that would seem that, yes, common sense would say there's been a change. That is a undue hardship that that the applicant can't change. They can't fit their vehicle in the garage. And when we get 4 feet of snow and you've got to undig your car, that's a pretty miserable time in Tahoe when we have good snow years. So I would argue that finding one that, times have changed from 1957 and that garages that were built back in the day don't fit the cars of today. As far as finding number 2 with circumstances or conditions that don't generally comply, there's properties with less setbacks that have greater encroachments with other conditions, circumstances and conditions related to each parcel. So there's other existing examples that you could make that finding. And then in the third, saying that we can't find that we can't meet the finding that it won't result in material damage to other properties. They received letters from their adjacent neighbors who are claimed in the finding that says they could be negatively affected, but yet we have letters from the neighbors saying, I'm okay with this, I'm not negatively impacted. So I think we can actually make all 3 findings. I think it was important what another commissioner brought up earlier, that and Lucille, the minor variance was explored to try and figure out, can we? And the reason they can't do a minor variance is the exact finding of finding 1, Tahoe. Like the exact layout and the circumstances of the property are why they couldn't just fit it into a minor variance, hence creating a hardship for this. And then I think it was very important that TRPA, the fire department, and the GID are, in agreement with this project. So, a lot of times in government, common sense isn't used. I think this is a good time for us to make the findings and use common sense.
Thank you very much, Christy. I have just a couple of brief questions that I could ask of the applicant, Mr. Rose. You're probably the best person. Can you tell me when you purchased your home?
We purchased it in December 2019.
December 2019. Okay. Where did you live previously?
The Santa Cruz Mountains.
Okay. Much snow in Santa Cruz Mountains?
No snow in the Santa Cruz
Okay.
Mountains, yeah.
When you bought the house, did your realtor or anybody else that you consulted with tell you there was a lot of snow in Tahoe?
It never came up. No,
Never came up.
Yeah.
Well, anecdotal evidence. I bought a house in Tahoe about 5 years ago. When we looked at the house, the snow was probably 5 or 6 feet up to the back door. I think when you buy property in Tahoe, you got to realize there's a lot of snow. The question of the vehicles, we have small garages. If your house was built in the last 10 years, you may have a larger garage, but you have small garages. You have big vehicles. I respect the fact that you can't get them in the garages probably. But the whole question of the variance is one, as Christy explained, and I think Nick hit on very well too. We have to look at the findings. We have to judge the property by the findings and make our decision accordingly. So I think this is a difficult one. You've got many pros on your side. There are a number of cons on the other side. I think I'll reserve going through all those until after we've heard public comment. But I do think it's important that we make a sound decision based on the facts, the circumstances, and the findings, and that's what I hope members of the Planning Commission will do individually. So if there are no other questions at this point, I will open it up to public comment, and then we'll bring it back to the members of the Planning Commission for further deliberations, a motion, and a vote.
Yeah, just Mr. Walter, to that point.
Yes, please.
We actually, when we purchased the house, one of the selling points was the 2-car garage. However, when we tried to pull the vehicles in, we realized there was just no way to make it happen. And that's, when my wife and I started exploring other options, just because we've got 3 boys, 14, 12, and 9. So downsizing cars into something smaller really is challenging, and also, potentially dangerous with hopefully the large snowfalls we'll get in the Tahoe area. So we do look at it as a pretty big hardship for us. And then, as mentioned, the shape and the size of the setbacks is pretty unusual, even vis-a-vis the rest of the neighborhood. And, our contractor, Mr. Masterfield, and I don't know if this was submitted as part of the application because it wasn't a requirement, actually did do an overlay where he kind of put some of the measurements. It was based on a satellite photo and kind of pictures, so it's not like a true survey. But it was very apparent that many of our neighbors obviously didn't go through commission. If they did get approval, nobody came out and checked the setbacks. So I do feel like, we are trying to abide by the letter of the law. We are following step by step the rules put out in front of us. And, I can see that our neighbors probably went ahead and did it, and will ask forgiveness if anybody ever came back out to check. But I just want to say that, we, have been working on this for over a year and have really been collaborative with all of the different jurisdictions we've worked with to do this right. I mean, we absolutely want to make sure that what we do is quality, it's improving the neighborhood, and, has the full support of our neighbors, the GID, the TRPA, and everybody in between. So just wanted to make that statement as well. And thank you for considering our case.
Thank you very much. I do agree with all of your points. If there are no other questions at this point, we'll open it for public comment. Each person will have 3 minutes for public comment if they choose to make it. So please, again, come forward to the microphone, sign in, and state your name, make your public comment, and then we'll bring it back to the Planning Commission. So are there public comments that would be made on this agenda item?
Jim Slade. As staff mentioned, a minor variance is 20% or less change. This major variance would be 67% decrease in the setback, so more than 3 times the level of a minor variance. This variance must meet all 3 required findings, and according to staff, this request meets none of those findings. When I look at the map of the property, it's kind of rectangular, it's not exceptionally narrow or shallow, and there's no real evidence of undue hardship. When the owners bought this home, they should have known what the setbacks were and accepted that. There is undoubtedly a reason why the setbacks are set where they are on each of the properties, as Mr. Taylor mentioned. It's a little hard for me to believe that their 2 SUVs don't fit in the garage without any evidence except their word. Cars weren't really all that much smaller 60 years ago when I think of an old Oldsmobile 88 or a Cadillac or the one car my family had, a Buick station wagon. I don't think it was really all that much smaller. I would be curious how many vehicles they do normally have at the house and how many trailers of any sort, since one was pictured in one of their photographs. Guessing what other properties might have variances is irrelevant, as are the setbacks in other areas, also likewise irrelevant. The rules are the rules. Changing the code has to go to the Board of County Commissioners. Regardless, since there's no disagreement that the request does not meet the required findings, it must be denied. To approve it would be a bad precedent, and clearly you need more information to proceed any further at all on the other properties and the other possible variances and et cetera, than just the information that you have today, which is very limited. But there may be other ways, as mentioned, that the owners can proceed and get their approval, but it should not be here and not today. Thank you.
Thank you. Other additional public comment? Yes, go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Iliana Rose, and I'm the one who, I'm the wife of Jason Rose, and in pursuing this approval, I came in person to get the application and figure out the process, and personally, I spoke extensively with Lucille, and I spoke extensively with Lorenzo, and I was explained that we need to get the approval from the neighbors, which we got 25 neighbors approving our case and supporting us. And there were lots of personal letters. Unfortunately, a lot of people do not want to get the government response sometimes, but they do respond to personal approach. And we're in great relationship with people. And unforeseen consequences, as a gentleman brought up, that we have a trailer. We've lost our house in the Santa Cruz Mountains in the wildfire last year. And unfortunately, we have, I had to evacuate my personal business. And, yes, we do have a trailer, but it's a temporary thing for us. With the vehicles, vehicles are much bigger than the entrance. Like if you know the SUVs, there's basically less than an inch from each side of the car when you try to park it in, and you're almost hitting the roof. And another car, I cannot even get in there. It's just impossible. And the property does have unique shape. And maybe on a picture on the map, it does look rectangular. But the steepness we have, we are downslope from the road, downslope from the driveway that has the entrance into the Lake Ridge. And we have to it's a diagonal driveway that you have to get the car in and into the garage at a pretty big angle. I personally cannot park it because I'm afraid of damaging the vehicle. And in the summertime, we have all the pine trees that we would like to keep because Tahoe area is beautiful as it is because of the vegetation. But the sap of the trees, when I drive out, I'm basically blind out of my windshield because of the sap. I just, and we have to drive kids to school. So it's almost impossible any time, any day of the year, it's either snow or the sap of the trees, or there will be, it's so sticky, I can't remove it with anything. I have to go through the car wash almost every day. And the stairs were brought up before, right? We do have the staircase extending all the way to the width of the driveway, which is covered with asphalt. If we do the minor variance, we would have to drill the hole in the middle of our driveway and split the driveway in two. So that would be with the size of the beam that would have to go as a support. We would not be able to go on either side with the car. So we would destroy the property altogether by doing that. If we do the major variance, we already discussed the plans with our neighbors, and we're very open with them about the designing and making it appealing and making more privacy there, because neither one of us want to impose on each other. And we already discussed how we're going to keep it as a carport, right? And then set back the railing so we can have space for them so they will be comfortable. And you can see even in the picture that the car that is on the right is higher than the garage opening. I mean, I would have to rebuild the whole house if I have to open up more space and put the car in the garage. And it's, I don't think I can approach that. I mean, I've lost one house last year. We're still working with a lot of issues with that, and we were planning on having this as a vacation house, but now it's a permanent residence. And, we have no other way of dealing with it, except I can put tarps there. I mean, I can do that. If that would be appealing for the neighborhood, I don't think any neighbor would approve for that. But making something structurally sound and something that is attractive and improves the look of Lake Ridge, everybody went on that. And everybody knows how much we struggle. And, another point is for the major variances, our friends in the circular driveway, they did apply for the major variance while building their house because of the setbacks as well. I know that for a fact because we discussed it with them. And during the building of their house, they had to go through the same process. So that's So I want to say, and we have the 25 neighbors signed up all around, Lower Lake Ridge, Upper Lake Ridge. We have some people type their own letters because they felt as to go and extend their support for our case. And this is not unusual when you just have to cover the vehicles. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome to leave those letters with the staff, and we can add those to the supplemental materials that will be included after the meeting. Are there other individuals who would like to make public comment on this agenda item?
That was public comment? That 10-minute dive was public comment?
I allowed her a little extra time since she is the applicant. I thought that was appropriate. I was trying to be generous and make sure that everyone has a fair hearing. So we didn't go too much overtime. Are there other members of the public that would care to make public comment? Seeing no other public comment, we'll close public comment on this agenda item, and I'll bring it back to the Planning Commission. At this time, if you do have additional questions that were raised during public comment that you'd like to ask the staff of the applicant, we can do that. If not, we can have a motion and discuss the issue before we proceed to a vote. I'll open it to members of the Planning Commission for comments, questions, or a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the major variance.
Nick would make a motion to approve the major variance. Would you like to go off of the recommended motion? It's either in your packet or on the screen, Nick. It's in the supplemental packet or on the screen.
Yes, I'll make a recommended motion to approve the major variance to the west side yard setback from 30 feet to 10 feet for a proposed carport and deck for Alan Mansfield, representing Jason and Yelena Rose, located at 12487 Tamarack Lane.
Thank you, Nick. I'd just make a minor typo. It's 1248, so you read it right on the screen. We just had a little addition there on the typo, so it's 1248. Is there a second to Nick's motion to approve the major variance?
I'll second that motion.
I'll second.
Brian seconds the motion. Christie, we have you on a little delay, so Brian was able to second that. It's appropriate now for the maker of the motion to speak on behalf of their motion or for other individuals to speak for or against the motion. Nick, did you want to make any comments in favor of the motion?
I am voting to approve the major variance for two reasons. One, it seems like the applicant has gone the extra mile to get the support of the community and the people that live in the subdivision. And two, given the history of that particular subdivision and the number of buildings and projects that are within that subdivision that are not abiding by the setbacks, I feel it's an undue burden on this particular applicant not to approve it.
Thank you very much, Nick. Other members wish to speak for or against the motion? Brian, go ahead.
So I speak for this, because when I do look at it, Sam Taylor said it perfectly, county code trumps HOA. And so when county code trumps HOA, we are sitting here as planning commissioners of the county, not board members of the HOA. And so when we looked at county code, this wasn't even a major variance and we shouldn't even be talking about this. So therefore, on finding one, I believe this is a hardship upon them. As I mentioned on number 2, we didn't provide overwhelming evidence to show that this isn't something that applies everywhere. From my understanding, there are a lot of properties just from the view here that are not the same. So, when we say that they don't generally apply to other properties, I'd say, yeah, the conditions are generally different from each property within even this subdivision. And yes, they are recorded, they are the HOA's rules, but the county is what we're deciding on, not the HOA. If the board members want to make a different decision, good for them. But we are the county, we are not the HOA. The granting of the variance we're representing in material damage. So to say that if somebody within 10 feet of somebody else's property is material damage, everybody in this room is damaging your neighbor. So to say that we're going to damage somebody because we're within 10 feet, I don't think that's a good enough argument to say that the neighbors are essentially damaged. So I believe it passes all three of the findings, and I believe that we should approve this.
Thank you, Brian. Bryce?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I respect the difficulty of the staff in rendering their decision. Oftentimes, they're criticized on the other end. I believe as a planning commissioner, it's my job to review the merits and conditions of each situation. This is a subdivision. This subdivision map was developed in 1957. Douglas County Code is 7 feet, and therefore I'm going to support this based on that and the reasons that my fellow members have stated.
Thank you, Bryce. Other comments from the Planning Commission? Maureen?
On the other side, ding dong, I will support staff's findings. I believe we have code for a reason. Even though the subdivision map was developed 50, 60 years ago, it is what is in existence. It is what we are working with. And I feel for the applicant, but it is the applicant's responsibility to do due diligence. And this is what happens when you buy something off the internet and don't go up and actually inspect the property. It's not our responsibility to make sure it works for them. It's their responsibility, and I wish I could feel differently. I appreciate their honesty in their letter that they wrote to us, but he gave the ages of his children, and it says the letter is his wife is left with our 3 small children, and teenage boys are not 3 small children. And his honesty in saying extending the deck will improve the architectural presence of our home, and I believe that. And keeping the sap off our cars, to me, is not a good enough reason to extend the deck threefold. So I will support staff's findings and vote no on the motion.
Thank you, Maureen. Mark, go ahead.
So while I can feel for the applicant, I realize that this is a very difficult situation, but unfortunately, the code is the code, and I believe that staff did make the right call.
Thank you, Mark. Christy, did you want to have any comments to make before we conclude the debate on the motion?
No, I don't have any new comments other than what I said earlier, where I do believe we can make all 3 findings.
Thank you very much, Christy. I did go out and look at the property in question. I think I'm very familiar with a lot of the properties in Tahoe. All of you have made excellent points. This is a very difficult decision. When I looked at the facts and the circumstances, I came down with several reasons to vote in favor of the variance. You did get a broad support of your proposal from members of the community. I think that's always very important. If there were individuals from the surrounding area who opposed this, it would be a pretty easy decision in my view. But you did get the approval of everyone that's important. I do agree with you. The lots are very unusual. The slope and the setbacks are very different all the way around in Tahoe. That creates hardships on individuals. So that's another point in favor. You do have a very difficult driveway. The pictures don't do it justice. You come down a steep hill, you make almost 180-degree turn into their driveway, then you have to jog a little bit to the right and then to the left to even go into the garages. The garages are small. Those are all favoring the major variance. Then when I look at the other side of the equation, I do think the staff has great expertise. I think they consider these things very carefully. Lucille, you've worked long and hard on this. You have great experience in dealing with all sorts of issues, and I do think it's always wise to trust the judgment of the staff. Nick, you made some very good points. We may be on opposite sides of this issue, Nick, but you raised the point of precedent will this set? If we allow a major variance of this nature, will there be 10 other properties that come forward and ask for a similar variance? Then when I come to the final analysis, I do have to look at the findings, and that's what we're supposed to do. I think there's probably not much question that you do meet finding number 2 and number 3, but the key one in my view is finding number 1, and in particular the clause where it says peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties to or exceptional and undue hardships upon the applicant. So I guess I come down on Maureen's side that I don't see this as a exceptional or undue hardship, given that the property does have garages. You should have understood what you were dealing with as far as the nature of your parking area. So based on that, I don't think finding number 1 can be made in the affirmative. So I would be voting against Nick's motion to approve the variance. So I will turn it back to anybody else who wants to add further comments. If there are no further comments, then we can call for a vote on Nick's motion to approve. Brian, would you like to go ahead for additional comments?
I just want to make a point on historical context. We're talking about a guy that wrote this development that didn't have a cell phone, didn't have a computer, didn't even have power windows. So to say that he, 70 years in the future, is going to make a good decision, I hardly think so.
Thank you, Brian. Any closing comments by members of the Planning Commission? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Again, this is Nick's motion to approve the development application, which would be the major variance in the side yard setback. And Brian, I believe you seconded this motion. So if you're in favor of Nick's motion for approval, you'd vote aye. If you're opposed to the motion, you'd vote nay. And we'll call the roll. Christie?
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
Bryce?
Aye.
Mark?
Nay.
Brian?
Aye.
Maureen?
Nay.
And the chair votes nay. So in this, there's 4 votes aye and 3 votes nay, and the motion is agreed to. Unless members of the Planning Commission feel they need to break, at this point, we'll move on to item number 2, and we'll see how far we get on item number 2. I think some people would like to take about a 5-minute break, so we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll come back at 2:30. We'll recess until 2:30. If we can go ahead and get started, then excuse me, we left off with agenda item 2. So if we can get started with agenda item 2, and I'll read this into the record. This is for possible action, discussion on a request for development application DP 21-0078, a special use permit, a special use permit to allow a 9,320 square foot commercial meat and poultry processing facility within an existing 40,391 square foot building. The subject parcel is located at 1300 Buckeye Road in Minden within the A19 Agriculture 1980 acre minimum parcel size zoning district in the Minden Community Plan area. The applicant is Park Ranch Holdings LLC, APN 1320-28-000-41. Lorenzo, you can make the staff presentation. Then, as we have done in the past, we'll have the applicant, we'll have questions, public comment, and then we'll move to the final proceedings and a vote. Go ahead, Lorenzo. And there is a supplemental packet. I think all members of the Planning Commission got this, and it is on the table outside the room that includes supplemental materials that's available for everyone. Go ahead, Lorenzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. Lorenzo Messina with Douglas County Planning for the record. And yes, the packet is available outside and it's going to be available online after the presentation and with all the other material that was received before and after publication of the agenda. I would like to start giving a little background on this special use permit. The applicant is requesting a special use permit to improve an existing facility dedicated to agricultural and agricultural business that is associated with it, and commence operating part of the structure as a meat processing facility. The improvements to the facility will include, one, the complete interior remodel of approximately 25% of the square footage of the existing structure to make it suitable to meat processing. And two, remodel of the parking and loading areas to improve ADA access, landscaping, and designation of stalls. The meat processing operations are to be carried out in the completely enclosed structure that is already existing, and they will have to meet federal, state, and local regulations. This is a map of the zoning of the property. It's, as you stated in the opening, it's about it's a large property, agricultural property, located northwest of the Muller Parkway alignment and the Buckeye Road intersection. And forgive me, going back to this, the legend as pointed in the zoning at the bottom of the map says that it's a A19. That is one of the 3 green colors. In this case, is A19. So agriculture 19-acre minimum, as described in the staff report. This is an aerial of the property. And as you can see, the access happens via Buckeye Road, which is a major collector road. And then northwards, there is a tree-lined street that then leads to the facilities. This is a map of the Buckeye Farm specific plan. This property is within the boundary of the plan that was adopted in 2020. And that star and that red boundary is approximately the shape and size of the actual property. Unfortunately, the parcel layout concept does not follow strictly the parcel lines that exist today because it's supposed to be conceptual in nature and proposes an alternative layout for roads and parcels and other elements. But that is so you have an idea of where that would be located within the conceptual land use plan. And I know that later we'll have the applicant present to give a presentation, and in their presentation, they will show how the distance to existing and future residential properties is related to the facility that we're going to be discussing today. But you can see that it is located on, and to give you some coordinates help here at the bottom right corner, there is a north arrow. It's a little hard to read. This was taken directly from the plan, but north is to the left of this image. So this is so you can see that Buckeye Road is actually running from the top to bottom of this image. And the parcel in question will be surrounded by what is labeled as a teaching farm, a future public facility, a village center farm, and then some agri and eco-tourism centers with Neighborhood Commercial Incorporated, and a Buckeye Creek Preserve / open space as identified in various paragraphs of the plan, which is a several-page document and is not really entirely related to this application for the operation of this business, but just to give some concept for possible future development of the area within the mid to long term. This is a zoomed-in map of the area. Again, this is still from the approved special plan for Buckeye Farm. And you can see at the bottom there is actually a label with the existing building that we are discussing and its relationship to the Buckeye Road and that layout and that what it is really the northeastern portion of the Buckeye Farm plan. Here instead you can see is depicted the site plan for this specific proposal. Because I understand that it might be hard to read for everyone in the room, I do want to point out that packet page 152 and 154 are the actual plans that were provided by the applicant, and they're listed as attachments in the application. Once again, north is to our left side of the screen in this case, so this is shifted, but where the northern area of the existing structure is where the proposed facility would be located if approved. You can see, besides the existing metal building, which is separated for this operation as opposed to the other area, which is, it would be still dedicated to what it is dedicated to today, which is supporting agricultural use. You can see it are depicted some loading zones on both sides on both of the long sides of the metal building, and also you can see the landscape improvements that the applicant is proposing, and the depiction of other engineering and improvements to the site that are necessary for a facility of this kind to operate. Here you can see two sides of the building. Namely, on the left side is actually the southern portion of the structure, and that is what you approach after you drive the tree-lined street. Staff did a site visit on the site, and that is an office that is related to the operations, and that parking lot would be improved as part of this application. On the right side, instead, is the northern end of the building, which you can see there is some elevation there because the property is actually, is elevated due to flood zone requirements, because on the surrounding area, the flood zones are different than the one that does not require elevation. And that's why back when this development came in, it was elevated. So today it is not, just to be clear, in the flood zone. It's a two-step process for this commission to review and make a decision on this permit. Number one, there would be findings for the special use permit related to this use itself, which is per County Section 20.660.010F, which is for this specific use of meat processing facility in an A19 zoning district. Those are three requirements that need to be met, which are that the facility needs to have 5 or fewer employees on site at one time, so it needs to be a relatively small-scale operation. It needs to process no more than 200 poultry or rabbits per day, or 60 larger animals per week. And finally, it does not include retail sales of the finished product. On top of that, the actual review of a special use permit requires its own set of findings, not requirements only. And there are 8 different findings that are discussed in the staff report. They're A to H, and they're listed in detail, packet pages 140 to 143. A summary of the findings that staff reviewed while looking at this proposal are, is there consistency with the master plan and the goals and policies of the new 2020 master plan that was recently approved? Is there compatibility with the neighborhood itself, where this special use permit would be requested for? Is there adequate infrastructure and facilities such as roads, water, or sewerage? What would be the impact on adjacent properties, and would that be minimal? It has to be minimal for the use to be approved in the finding section. And it's not located in a special archaeological or cultural area. And finally, it has to not be detrimental to public health, safety, convenience, and welfare. Here I would like to take a moment to discuss water and sewer requirements and the proposal that the applicant has brought forth. Since publication of the agenda, staff has received some questions regarding the water and sewer provisions for this project. And what the applicant is proposing is a commercial septic system per the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection requirements that would have to review the engineering of the actual system itself, and then approve it for the use, the specific use. And then additionally, they're proposing the usage of the existing agricultural well, which is on the site. A couple of things that are worth mentioning now is that the site is particularly unique in which it's not currently within the water and sewer district boundary, because it lies somewhat outside of it. However, there are public water and sewer lines that are either on the parcel or directly along Buckeye Road, and that is in the case of the sewerage line. It is not entirely clear whether the proposal as presented by the applicant would have to necessarily connect today, because although in the future, with the expansion of the sewer and water district boundary, eventually it might be 10 or 15 or 20 years from now, would need to be annexed to the water and sewer district and then provide those facilities. However, at the day, it is not within that boundary. However, the county and this commission has the ability to recommend that the facility actually connects to the public sewerage and water system. But it is not required at this time necessarily. Staff discussed planning, the planning division, the engineering division, we discussed the matter today and what could be the impact on the water resources, on the quality of water resources, also on what effect would the commercial septic system have on the land. Unfortunately, I do have to admit that and the planning division is not necessarily qualified to review the engineering of a septic system. Usually that is left for, again, the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, which is literally their mandate to review certain requirements. But I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have on this as the best of my ability. And I believe County Engineer Jeremy Hutchins is present today for some more technical questions, or I would defer to Deputy Director Booth on additional questions on water and sewer. However, once again, the current proposal in front of you has a commercial septic system and uses existing agricultural well and water that is present on site. And staff, however, has conditions that would be readily available in the case that this commission would like to ask to connect on water and sewer. After reviewing the project, this is a recommendation from staff. It's a recommendation of approval for this project, which again is only for the special use permit to allow the use to operate. If the commission finds that the use should be allowed to operate, then the applicant would come in for permits of various nature for the actual improvement inside of the existing structure. There is a lot that would go on in getting a business of this type started in that facility. A lot of improvements, again, a lot of reviews from different divisions and fire and again, the state itself. At this point, however, unless the commission has additional questions, I know that the applicant is present and would like to have their own presentation shown.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. We'll turn to the applicant. If the applicant or the applicant's representative would like to make a presentation at this point, please go ahead, go to the podium and state your name, and you may proceed.
For the record, Dave Lundergreen. I'm here on behalf of Park Cattle Company. I'm part of the team that has been working on this project for the last few months. I just wanted to introduce our team today. We have 4 of us here. Myself, Gary Thurm is the engineer who helped with the design of the project and also the engineering for the septic. And so he's going to do a presentation for you. I think one thing I'd just like to say up front, and I know there'll be more debate, but I think there's been a lot of discussion over the last year about Douglas County needs a meat processing facility. I think we have the place for it. I think this is, you know, the ideal situation, the ideal place for a meat processing facility, and I just hope that we can work it out today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. So, Mr. Thurm, would you like to go next?
To our presentation today and for a special use permit for Dave Park and Park Ranch Holdings.
If you can go ahead and speak right into the microphone, they're very sensitive. Thank you.
Okay. For a meat processing facility located here in Minden, Nevada. I would like to thank Sam Booth and Lorenzo for their work on this, and just, you know, it seems like you can try to interpret county code, and you want to, you know, Dave has a vision of how this is supposed to be, but we also need to stick with within the law and county code, and we're here to do that. Anyway, so this is Park Ranch Harvest Facility. Park Ranch Holdings LLC, located at 1300 Buckeye Road, Minden, Nevada. Again, my name's Gary Thurm. I'm owner of Three Castles Engineering here in the valley. Dave Park hired me to put together design documents and help through the process of obtaining a special use permit to help them harvest and process animals and meat for sale here in the valley. Not for private sale, but for more commercial operations. Nobody's going to be coming to this facility other than trucks to pick up the meat and owners to pick up the meat. Anyway, so what is a harvest facility? A harvest facility is known as a meat processing facility within Douglas County Code Title 20, 20.660.010 to be specific. It's located at the Park Ranch headquarters at the Buckeye Road in Minden, Nevada. And David Park is proposing a 9,320 square foot meat harvesting facility. Inspected by the United States Department of Agriculture, live animals enter the facility, they are dispatched, dressed out, cleaned off, then inspected by USDA meat inspection personnel, cured, then processed and packaged for delivery or pickup to or by owners, grocery stores, restaurants. Little fact, in 2019, 34.3 million head of cattle were harvested in the United States. Where is the Park Ranch? Well, in the previous slide, we mentioned that the harvest facility will be located off Buckeye Road in Minden. Formerly known as Park Land and Cattle, the Park family has been ranching in the valley as well as Antelope Valley since 1861. The Park family, the Dangberg family, both pioneers in the Carson Valley since the late 1800s, have been grazing cattle on this prime agricultural land, producing beef for consumption by locals and visitors ever since. Another little fact here, average person consumes 4 ounces of meat daily in the United States. So, let's see here. What types of animals will be harvested? It's proposed that cattle, hogs, lamb and sheep, and big game will be harvested at this facility and processed. In the announcement in the paper, it said that meat and poultry, we are not considering poultry at all. So how many animals will be harvested? On average, 30 head of cattle could be processed per week. 60 head is allowed by Douglas County. The limiting factor is the curing time, and that will be dependent on the owner of the animal. The curing cooler proposed has a capacity of 1,200 pound hanging both sides of beef. During the harvesting process, the animal's split in half and it hangs both sides of it. And how many people can that feed? Well, a 30-month-old cattle or a full-grown steer might weigh upwards of 1,200 pounds, sometimes more, sometimes less, and processed to about 500 pounds. And at 30 head per week, that can feed 7,500 people per day. So this is a map. You can see Hayborn Road there And there are 2 green arrows and then a little note there that says proposed facility. That is, it's about 1,500 feet, or I'm sorry, 1,300 feet north of Buckeye to the north end of the facility. And currently, the nearest home outside the notifying radius is over 3,700 feet from the facility. I think the notifying radius was 2,160 feet, or right there. In the future, residential homes proposed will be as close as about 3,000 feet east of the facility. For the local farmers and ranchers in the Carson Valley, Antelope Valley, and Smith Valley, as well as Eastern California, if they're bringing their animals through this valley to take them to Wolfpack Meats in Reno or the Houghton Valley Meats in Fallon, they will be reducing their travel distance by about 60 miles and 80 miles respectively, if they have the option to bring them to Park Ranch Meats. I know 60 to 80 miles doesn't seem like a lot to you and me, an hour's drive, but when you're hauling cattle, it puts a lot of stress on the animal. Hopefully we can get this facility here and have that option. Looks like it kind of, why is it? It's kind of cut off. There we go. Thank you. So, talk a little bit about food and fiber security here in the United States, and better yet, a local option. On May 30th of this year, the largest meat processor and supplier in the world, and second largest in the United States, JBS Foods, were shut down for 5 days due to a cyber attack on their computer systems. They ultimately had to pay a ransom of $11 million US dollars to get their production back on track to get meat to its destination around the world. JBS Food controls 20% of the slaughtering capacity for U.S. cattle and hogs. Park Ranch Meats does not want the residents of Douglas County, Nevada, to be in that situation, and believes that one-way ranchers and farmers in the northern Nevada and the western region can maintain a local source of fresh meat is to have harvest and processing facility here in the Carson Valley. As such, the risk of not having available meat in the grocery stores when we need it is not an option. Well, fact, according to USDA, as of 2017, there were an estimated 11,232 head of cattle in Douglas County, 5,441 of which are cows. So, this is a facility. So as you're looking at this facility, up on the page is north. This building's about 375 feet long, I believe. So from the north tip all the way to the south tip's 375 feet. This is 75 feet in depth, 120 feet wide. This shell that you see here is existing. In years past, and even this year, they're processing onions or harvesting onions. So on the right-hand side, the animals enter. They're held. So there's two entrances. One's at ground level for trailers that may need to stay there overnight. That pen holds about 30 or so head. On the very north end, there's a loading dock, and that loading dock has a ramp down to the holding pen area. There's a little alley there with pens on each side for holding cattle and hogs and sheep. The floor does need to be retrofitted to create a non-slip floor. Again, we don't want to stress the animals out. We want to make it as easy as possible. Anyway, so there would be water available in all the pens, food in the pen on the south end, the larger, what would be used as an overnight pen. And then at the kind of the top of the page, you can see a little shaded area where the cattle are kind of coming around in a little S shape, and that's for the handlers to be able to kind of guide the cattle in. Again, all of this is all we're trying to keep the animals calm and safe until they enter the slaughter floor. Slaughter floor, I won't go into it in great detail, but animals stunned, they go through a process where they're cut in half. As soon as they're cleaned, they get inspected before they go into the they get inspected again before they go into the hot box, which is a cooler that there's a lot of heat, and you got to get rid of that warm air in a relatively short amount of time. And then they go into a curing cooler for several days. But anyway, that depends on the owner and whoever our client is. And then they, after the curing time, they go to the processing floor where they are packaged, and we'll get into that a little bit later. There's on the left-hand side of the page, there's the area where trucks come and pick up the product. And then there's, you'll notice, just something interesting here. You'll notice the, if you're on the slaughter floor where the animal's being harvested, there's a USDA office, employee office, and you can't go from that side to the processing floor. At no time can an employee go from there to the processing side. They have to physically leave the building, and if for some reason they're going to the processing floor, they have to go to the other side. And you'll also see that there's a USDA office on the other side. So during the harvesting and the processing, USDA inspection service employee has to be there on site. So let's just talk a little bit more about handling of livestock. At Park Ranch Meats, the owner-operator, David Park, is committed to having a safe and clean facility while treating the animals humanely. Dr. Temple Grandin's extensive work and recommendations for handling of livestock will be incorporated into the operation from the time the animal is received to the time when the animal is brought from the holding pens to the harvest floor. And for more information on Dr. Temple Grandin's work, you can go to www.grandin.com. She's a amazing lady that really knows how to handle livestock and care for them and make this whole process a little easier. Recommendations by Park Ranch Meats to the livestock producers that bring the animals to the facility will be made during the contract process. Those may include transportation and handling instructions to limit the stress on the animals, required cleaning of the animals prior to arriving at the facility, and proof of age, older than 30 months or less than 30 months. The harvest process in just kind of a numbered format here, and I kind of went over it going through the floor plan and plant layout. But anyway, so animals arrive, they're put into temporary holding area inside the facility. 2 days a week, maybe even 4 days a week, animals will be taken to the slaughter floor. 15 large animals a day can be dressed out, cleaned, and inspected, and ready to go into the cooler. The dressed out halves are placed in a cooler to bring down the temperature of the meat carcass for 24 hours, and during that time, evaporation occurs and condensate is evacuated prior to entering the aging cooler. After 24 hours, the meat carcass goes into the aging cooler. Once the meat is cured, the various parts of the beef sides are cut up into various choice cuts or ground up, then ground up, weighed, labeled, placed in the freezer cooler and ready for pickup. USDA inspector also certifies grades of the meat during this process. The packaged meat is picked up by the owner or the purchaser of the meat. Water usage. I've done a little research on this. This table that you see is from a study that was done by Rami Ziara, University of Nebraska at Lincoln, back in June of 2015. But anyway, this is kind of a breakdown of what water's used for the process. They're at about 355 pounds per 1,000 pounds of body weight. That could equate to about 425. Wolfpack Meats, if you ever get a chance to tour the facility, I encourage it. They're estimating 150 to 200. We went on the high end as far as estimating our water use at 30 head. So at 425 gallons per head and 30 head processed a week, annual water usage could be as high as 2 acre feet, or 637,500 gallons. And then at 60 head a week, annual usage would be closer to 4 acre feet. Typical household, if you're on an acre, it used to be 3 acre feet. Now it's, under current Nevada law, it's about 2 acre feet per annum. We selected Reno Rendering. We received a proposal from them. They're going to be rendering, which is removing the animal waste such as fat, bone, hide, other animal waste on a periodic basis. If Dave decides to keep the hides or other parts, of course, make sure that it goes to a licensed tanning operation, whatnot. So, but on a periodic basis, that removal will occur from the processing floor and from the sand and grease interceptor located on the north end of the building. So to handle the animal waste and water from the harvest floor, we're proposing a 10,000 gallon solids fat and grease interceptor. It's proposed to separate out the solids and fats from the water that's used to clean the animal on the slaughter floor. Reno Rendering removes all of this on a regular basis as the tank fills up. The remaining liquids are disposed of into a standard leach field. Standard leach field can be used as the water table is at 24 feet below the ground surface. So in treating the effluent, you know, and one thing that's, so we're proposing a 10,000 gallon septic tank with a sand and grease interceptor and a denitrification system that will be used to treat the effluent by adding oxygen to and removing as much as 90% of the nitrogen in its various forms prior to entering the infiltration trenches. We selected the Biomicrobics FAST system. It's a 9.0. It can treat up to about 9,000 gallons per day. If you look through their literature, it's equivalent to being able to treat 26 to 130 homes per day. It obviously varies on water usage. This is for 9,000 gallons. At 425 gallons of water per large animal used during the cleaning and disinfection process and 15 head a day, we're at 6,375 gallons of water that would be required to clean the animals. Again, the estimated water use for the facility is 2 acre-feet per year. At 50 weeks, and that was at 30 head, and that water will come from the existing well. It's located on the east side of the building. So the septic system's about 100 feet or so north. North is this way. Wells here.
Mr. Thurm?
Yes.
While you're on that page, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you kind of say how 1 gets to 2?
Oh.
Please.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. So this is actually a 2-compartment system. We're actually proposing a battery system where there's actually 3 compartments. So effluent and solids and fat enter the first compartment. The solids fall to the bottom of the tank. The fats stay suspended, and then they move with the water into the second compartment. And then in the third compartment, the inlet that goes into the third compartment is lower than where the fats would be suspended. And so that effluent, we've gotten rid of the solids, the fats, and that's where the biomicrobic system is located. Oxygen is constantly introduced into that third compartment, and then that effluent is recirculated through, it's like a charcoal carbon filter. It's supposed to remove 90% of the nitrates.
So it'll be much like a traditional sewage plant that they have when the water comes in and you have the sludge tank where they have the microbes working on the top.
Yes,
To some extent.
For primary, yes. It's definitely not like MGSDs or anything like that. This is
Different scale, but you know what I'm talking about.
This is very similar to a residential. We just we have a different mammal producing waste, and you know, there will be a screen that will try to pick up as much of the hair and, you know, just things that aren't, you really don't want to get in there, but those both the solids and the fats area where hair may even stay suspended, is both those are going to have an area where Reno rendering can come. They can remove that stuff on a daily or weekly or, you know, as needed basis.
Okay. I think I got it. I'll ask more questions later.
Sure. That's fine. So continuing on with some environmental concerns mitigation. So in the middle of this slide, you can see the actual harvest facility. So the harvest facility building was built up 3 feet, and it's shown here as up and out of the floodplain per the current FEMA maps, and it's surrounded by X-shaded AO1 and AO2 zones. That's 1 and 2 feet of flooding depth. And then to the east, there's Buckeye Creek that has an AE zone. And that's the primary flooding source that you see. Buckeye Creek is the flooding source from the Pine Nut Mountain Range, and it currently runs along the east property line, north, then west until it encounters 395. Dave and Park Ranch, they do utilize that water, and in the master plan agreement, you can see where the future Moeller Parkway's coming through. The outlines in yellow. It's 105 feet dedication by Dave Park. But one thing to consider here is, while the county's going to allow him to be able to still utilize those same waters that he had access to, building that road up is, I mean, I'm pretty sure this thing is going to be out of the floodplain entirely to the north and to the south. All right. So we talked a little bit about what animals are going to be harvested here, and I just want to kind of go over each of those a little bit. So cattle, beef cattle raised in northern Nevada and the rest of the western region to be processed for sale require a brand inspection when entering the holding area for slaughter and processing. Many of the cattle that will be processed are owned and harvested from Park Ranch. These are 2 current brands that the Park Ranch holds. And beef cattle, average arrival weight is about 1,200 pounds, and dressed out, ready to be packaged, is about 500 pounds. So just like beef comes from cattle, pork comes from hogs. Pork, average arrival weight It would be about 250 pounds, and average dressed out weight about 140. Lamb meat comes from lambs that are less than 12 months old. Lambs are usually considered sheep after 10 to 12 months, and mutton is the meat if the sheep is processed for packaging and sale. Average arrival weight about 90 pounds, and dressed out 50 pounds. And this is the last slide. Big game will also be processed in this facility. This processing is more seasonal than other animals processed here. I mean, they're all kind of seasonal just because they're mammals. And anyway, the packaged meat is not to be sold, rather to be consumed by the owner that brought the animals to be processed. The big game tag will need to stay with the largest part of the animal throughout the duration of slaughter, and processing is required by the Nevada Department of Wildlife. Types of big game harvested: deer, pronghorn antelope, elk, Nevada's famous bighorn sheep, and mountain goats. Just a little note here, check with the Nevada Department of Wildlife to verify which animals a tag is required for hunting. And that's my presentation, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to ask, or Dave Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thurm. Mr. Park, did you want to make any comments, or should we move right to questions? Please go ahead.
For the record, David Park. I really don't have any comments, but I'm available to answer questions with Mr. Thurm and Mr. Lendergreen.
Thank you very much for being here. We'll bring it back to the Planning Commission now then, and you can ask questions of the staff or the applicant. And Mark, you've got your microphone on. I'll recognize you first.
So, Nevada revised statutes require that I disclose that I've known David for several decades, and he is a client of mine. A reasonable person would conclude in my situation that this will not affect my decision-making, and I will be voting on this matter.
Thank you very much, Mark. Any other disclosures? If there are none, I would like to remind members of the Planning Commission that we are the final authority on this. This is a special use permit. This would not go to the Board of County Commissioners. Also, I want to remind everyone that the findings are what we should make our decision on. The findings are on packet page 140, and there are 8 findings A through H. And they are listed there in detail, so that when we come to a final conclusion would be something that if you cannot support the favorable recommendation, you would cite whichever findings you believe cannot be met. So with that, then we'll start with questions from members of the Planning Commission. Again, Christy, if you want to jump in at any point, please just raise your voice, and we'll get to you with questions for the applicant or for the staff. Raise your hand if you have questions at this point. Oh, yes, Maureen reminded me, in the supplemental materials that were handed out to members of the Planning Commission and will be included in the packet is a letter in support, email in support by Mary Booher of Montevideo Circle in Minden for this project. So that is in the packet, and I believe the members of the Planning Commission all have that. So questions from members of the Planning Commission at this point for the applicant or the staff? Nick, go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation, guys. Looks like a really nice facility, and I do think that Douglas County needs a meat processing plant in the valley here. This one looks good. It's not around any houses, near light industrial. So all good. So I have a couple questions. This is right next to a light industrial zoned area. Is this but it's inside the Buckeye Agri-Hood project. Is the entire Buckeye Agri-Hood project zoned A19? Or are there different zonings within the Buckeye project?
My understanding is that the majority of it is A19 right now. However, there is portions that are light industrial that are within the Agri-Hood, but they're small in comparison to what Bentley owns.
But this one is on A19.
Correct.
Okay. Now, is there a development plan in place with the Planning Commission for Buckeye Agri-Hood as an entire project?
There's a specific plan at this point.
Okay. And those areas are designated light industrial or A19 or?
They are, however, in the specific plan, as Lorenzo had up a slide earlier on, it identified what we proposed as where the residential development will occur.
Right.
And other portions of the Agri-Hood.
Okay.
But for the most part, well, not most part, almost all of it is A19 right now.
Okay. How close is the sewer currently to the facility?
Sure. For the record, Dave Lundergreen. The sewer is in Buckeye, right in Buckeye Road, and it's approximately 1,200 feet from the structure and probably more like 1,500 feet to the proposed area that we are.
Okay. And have you done any engineering analysis or environmental analysis as to the pros and cons versus a septic system versus hooking up to the sewer?
Yeah, I can let Gary speak to that a little bit more. We have spoke with NDEP in detail about a proposed septic system, and we've received a lot of input from them on, this design and stuff. So we're very confident that we feel it's the best design, more so than even discharging into a public sewer, because we're managing it better, with our system. But I'll let Gary explain how it works, because it is a very detailed system, and
okay.
As far as county code.
But is there any negative to your facility hooking up to the Minden-Gardnerville sewer system that you know of?
We have not approached MGSD because we were under the impression that we have the right to, we're far enough away. We're not within the zoning district, or, we're not annexed to the sewer, so we have not reached out to MGSD. So we don't really know what their requirements would
Okay.
be.
I'm just trying to figure out what is the best way to manage the effluent, okay? I mean,
Yeah, I think
from a
maybe
cost standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, for all I know, it might be an advantage to go into the sewer system, right? It might be much more appropriately handled that way. So, yeah, that's one area that I'm interested in. Now, you've done financial analysis on this and profitability analysis on this. Do you expect this to be a profitable venture?
Yes, we've received, we haven't done a true financial impact study on it, but we've received a lot of input from people that are interested in doing business with us already, from some sheep companies and other ranchers, et cetera, locally.
And what proportion of the animals that you process will actually come from the valley here?
I would say
50%?
From the
Yeah.
valley?
Yeah.
Well, let me clarify that.
Okay.
So I would suspect that nearly 100% will come from the western region of Western Nevada, including Smith Valley, even as
Okay.
far as California and such. But and furthermore, I think it's hard to say right now, but 25 to 50% of the business of the operation will be custom work for other farmers and that have animals besides ourselves.
Okay. So a large portion is actually going to serve Douglas County.
Absolutely. We've been approached by farmers, ranchers, and mostly they're local too, that have meet retail businesses that need this service.
Right.
And so, yes.
Okay, good. And where do you anticipate the hogs are going to come from?
Well, we've been approached by others as well, and we've even contemplated ourselves of raising some hogs ourselves.
Okay. On your property here in the valley?
Yeah, it'd be somewhere in the valley.
Okay. Okay. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you, Nick. Very good questions. Other questions from members of the Planning Commission? Brian?
So I say the only question I had, and, kind of leads to, the discussion of how close this is to the residences. Can you guys bring up the slide that they had with the 3,000 versus the 3,700? So not to make Lorenzo switch back and forth, but when we look at this, it kind of looks like we got two ag parcels of about equal size. Would you say so, David?
Correct.
So when we're looking at the Buckeye specific plan that Lorenzo provided, it looked like the houses went out to that middle line. And yet this says 3,000, so explain the difference.
Yeah, so you're correct. That's not accurate. The 3,700 is, so the Buckeye Farms residential actually goes out further to, as you just noticed, and it's probably more like half that of the 3,700.
That was kind of my estimation. If we go by the line, it's
exactly
right around that line. So in the end, when the thing does get built
1,800,
out,
2,000 feet.
that could be about, 2,000 feet, possibly within the noticing radius was what I was kind of trying to get at. But also, like you guys said, this is a plan, and if you moved it yourself, you obviously have the ability to do so because it's only a conceptual plan, correct? You could actually change the allocation of where the houses actually are?
That was actually my fault. And it should have been, it was closer to 2,000 feet. And I apologize.
I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about it. I just did, when I'm doing math, I'm doing 700 minus, and I wasn't quite seeing it. But, what I'm pointing out is the fact that we do have a specific plan that may reach as far as that line. However, it is a plan. It is conceptual in nature. And we did see a casino behind my office turn into houses. So when we look at these plans, they are down on paper, but however, when you bring the ultimate approval, you can change the configuration within that area. Is that correct?
I suspect we could, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Other questions from members of the Planning Commission? Mark?
Yes. So this is for Gary. So Gary, you said that if this thing is operating at full capacity, it's going to use approximately 4 acre-feet or 2 1-acre house sites full of water. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then I'm assuming that Mr. Park would have to convert his agricultural, or part of his agricultural well to a domestic use or something. Is that possible?
Well, actually, pretty sure that is considered domestic well.
Okay.
And so if we need to divert, or if Dave needs to divert any water rights to that, we will do that to the state engineer.
Okay. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you very much, Mark. Other questions from members of the Planning Commission? Christie, any questions on your end? I just have a couple of small ones that I can go ahead with, unless you had anything at this point.
No, I don't have any questions at this point.
Okay, thank you. David or Gary, the existing building we note in the packet is about 40,000 square feet. But that says the meat processing will be about 9,320 square feet. So what's the rest of the square footage? Is that the offices, the USDA office, your office, the holding pen, the coolers, things like that?
No, that's included in the 9,300.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. But the balance is equipment storage, our shop.
Okay. So that won't have anything to do with the meat processing at all?
It will not.
Okay, so the large portion of the building is going to be non-meat processing?
Correct.
Okay. And The office, that's a general park ranch office, that'll remain a general park ranch office where you do your operations. How many people work in that office?
Actually, 1.5.
Okay, all right.
One full-time employee, and I'm there part-time.
Yeah, I'm sure you
I'm
got a
in
lot
and
of
out.
you got a lot of people in the field rather than the office doing the real work, right?
Right.
But those people are not going to be affected by this the meat processing at all. So you've got a pretty clean facility, and the separations are going to be pretty distinct, as Gary explained, I think, right?
Correct.
And then. Speaking also then of the point, I voted against the meat processing facility that we previously considered that Sinclair Farm had. I had concerns with the neighboring properties, the smell, the manure, the other hazardous or negative effects, I should say, to the surrounding areas. But everything that you're going to be doing is enclosed inside the one building. You're going to actually load the animals from the truck to the building and have a holding pen inside the building. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it's important to understand that the comment that you just made is true, and this is not a confined feeding operation. You know, we do that operation 30 miles south from here. So what will happen is the animals will be transported from either our operation or others to the facility, and within, hours, the harvest will occur.
Okay, thank you. And then kind of going back and amplifying on Brian's point, we've got the Buckeye Farm specific plan that we've kind of overlaid, and Lorenzo's laid that out, I think, very well. And we can see how it fits in with the other agriculture areas that are immediately surrounding the building that we're concerned with. My concern would always be with the neighboring residential properties, and as Brian pointed out, we're a long ways from those now, and what you have explained is that neighboring residential properties in neighborhood one, I think would probably be the closest, and they're over 1,500 feet, and I think I calculated that out to city blocks. It's about 5 or 6 city blocks, so it's going to be a fair distance away. I also compared this, I think, with Wolfpack, and I think Wolfpack is in an area where there's some apartment buildings that might be even a block or two away. So you do have what you would consider an adequate separation with proposed homes that would be in Buckeye Farm.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at on Lorenzo's map of the Buckeye Farms, it's actually centrally located within the surrounding agriculture uses, and so it couldn't be any further away from residential than possibly and as part of the project.
Okay, and those are your homes. You're going to have to sell them. So if they would be severely impacted, that certainly wouldn't be a good selling point.
Right.
Okay. I don't think I have any other questions at this point. If there's no other questions from members of the Planning Commission, then we can open it to public comment. We'll open this for public comment. Again, if you come to the microphone, please sign in on the sign-in sheet and then state your name and make your public comment, and they'll be limited at 3 minutes per person. If we have other individuals, if they want to stand up and line up by the wall, and we'll proceed with each individual as they come up. So please go ahead, sir.
Okay. My name is Tim Milliron, and some of you may know that I'm heavily involved with the Sinclair litigation, and it was our group that brought the concerns to the commission that they had the big meeting at. I've learned more about slaughterhouses than I ever wanted to know. I have a degree in civil engineering. I retired from the Department of Water Resources. I just wanted to point out that there are significant differences between the system that they're proposing and what Sinclair did. Sinclair was proposing what was essentially an experimental waste treatment plant. And it was going to be right on top of not necessarily the aquifer, but on top of the water table. The water table at the Sinclair Ranch is 1 foot underground, right? Compared to what Mr. Parks is proposing. He's got at least 24 feet. I have checked the records of all the wells in the area, And he does seem to have plenty of room to leach down before we have any problems with our aquifer. One thing that Sinclair didn't have was the denitrification. And on any slaughterhouse, that is really the key component. Cattle, when they're slaughtered, do produce a lot more nitrates than any, like a household system is. I do have confidence in NDEP to check their system and make sure it works. I think that this is an excellent opportunity. I was never really against the slaughterhouse at Sinclair. I was just more worried about the water quality of their system. And it appears that the system that they're proposing is very common in the United States. It's not experimental, and I really wouldn't anticipate any problems there. They do have the sewer nearby. I haven't done any cost estimate, but I'm sure they have. And so I think either system that they use will work real well. And I would recommend you guys approve the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other public comment?
Hi, I'm Sue Sullivan. I live in Montera. I just have a couple of questions. He cleared up the Sinclair issue with me as far as the differences. I do have a question. I'm concerned about the smell. Is that an issue that they are going to address, or is that something that we won't have to worry about being residents of Montera? I also wanted to address the traffic issue with large trucks. Is that going to be a problem because we're, with all the new homes, the townhomes, the homes across the street by Kinnar, causing a lot more traffic than we're used to? Is that going to be an issue? So those are my concerns.
Thank you very much. If people do have questions that come up in public comment, then members of the Planning Commission can raise those with staff or the applicant after we finish all public comment. So, other public comment?
Jim Slade. I believe that this type of facility would be an asset to the Carson Valley, but a special use permit is deservedly required because there are a great many locations where it would be completely inappropriate. As to required finding A, consistency with the policies of the master plan, staff starts by referring to the Carson Valley region without mentioning that refers to the entire valley from Indian Hills to Genoa, Minden, Gardnerville, and the Ranchos, which makes it so vague as to be irrelevant. Staff then attempts to explain its consistency with the ag element without mentioning that subject parcel is not in any of the 3 identified agricultural communities in the county. It is in the Minden Community Plan, which states that it is, quote, suitable for future urban development or otherwise preserved for open space. That community boundary was expanded there to accommodate the dense urban-style development of Park's Buckeye Farm. Staff briefly mentions that and that the future land use is receiving area, meaning that it is, quote, identified for future urban development. The applicant totally ignored the Buckeye Farm plan and the fact that it is receiving area. Required finding B, the proposed use is compatible with and preserves the character and integrity of adjacent development and neighborhoods, which should include the already planned and approved development. Buckeye Farm, yet the applicant fails to acknowledge that the Buckeye Farm plan shows that this exact area is as indicated as a neighborhood commercial center, which could be inconsistent with a slaughterhouse. Adjacent to this parcel to the west is slated to be a, quote, teaching farm and future public facilities. What type of public facilities? Would they be consistent with a slaughterhouse? We have no idea because they didn't address it. Staff also quotes that the proposed project is also surrounded by A19 parcels in all directions. The required finding only refers to adjacent property, which to the east and north is zoned light industrial. Park falsely states that, quote, all the adjacent properties are zoned A19. That is not true. They also failed to inform us that just over a quarter mile from the slaughterhouse will be a dense urban-style residential development, and that within a mile of the proposed slaughterhouse will be more than 2,000 homes, far more than within a mile of the proposed facility at Centerville and 88. It is incredibly disappointing that the applicant has not been more accurate and forthcoming in their portrayal of the area. By completely ignoring the future land use of receiving area and the Buckeye Farm specific plan, including the planned use of the subject and adjacent parcels, it seems that Park Ranch is trying to pull a fast one on the county. I believe that this type of facility would be an asset, but only in the right location. With neighborhood commercial planned on the same parcel, an elementary school just over half a mile away, and more than 2,000 homes scheduled to be built within 1 mile, I don't believe that this is an appropriate location. You should deny this application. There are far better places for such a facility.
Thank you. Other members of the public for a public comment?
Susan Wanless, and I too feel that this is an inappropriate place to have a slaughterhouse. I am concerned about the extra traffic on Buckeye Road as a result of this. I'm concerned that they're going to hook up to possibly to the sewer and to the city water, as was commented early on. The water usage scares me. Nevada has a real problem with the water right now. I've heard that they're thinking about sending water down to Las Vegas. So if we're already at a water shortage, there's a definite problem there. The smell is something that I would find hard to deal with. I also am concerned about my land value being decreased as a result of living close to a slaughterhouse. And I do feel that another location would be better. I also can't understand why we don't have more people that are concerned about this.
Thank you very much. Other public comment?
Hello, my name's Curly Hoagland, and the housing development that's to the west is upwind. I'm just worrying about the smell, the odors that go to the east if the wind comes out of the west 90% of the time. We already live with Bentley Farms effluent fertilizing, and it smells, well, like a sewer opening on a hot summer day. Excuse me. Just wondering what the odor, whether anybody's thought about that, the people that live to the east.
Thank you very much. Other public comment?
Hi, my name is Courtney Kemp. I'm born and raised in this valley, and I see the need for this for the future generations. We have 4-H people, we have FFA kids. They can't take their animals anywhere. Now we have kids that don't have anything to do because that's what our valley has to offer for them. As for smell, the animals will not be there very long, in my understanding, unless you have animals that are really housed there for more than 48 hours. It takes a long time for smell to develop. As for the road, it's a state route, in my opinion. I believe that is zoned light industrial, so we will have big rigs going up and down the road at all times. I'm completely for this.
Thank you very much. Other public comment?
Hi, I'm Christy Lyons. I am 100% for this. I kind of chuckle a little bit about the not in my backyard. I went through the whole Sinclair thing, and everybody said, why not do it off Buckeye? Same people came and said, don't do it there because it's their backyard. I think we're going to get that no matter where we go. I agree, we need this more than anything. I just had 2 of my cows have to go all the way up to Reno to get processed, and in fact, they come here. It's a mobile game butcher that comes to your land dispatches them on your land and then takes them off. And that is what our community is going to. The smell, like I said, the smell is not going to come. We do have cows here. That's what you move to. That's what everybody wants. They want to see open land and cattle, and now they say, we don't want it. It's just a lot of contradiction in this community. It makes me kind of sad to live in it at times because we want to support our local rancher, and then they have to go up to this brutal, like, no type of a thing. So with that, I 100% support this location, a slaughterhouse or harvesting facility, and especially the way they proposed it. It looks great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Additional public comment?
Hello, my name's Kristen Miller, and I was, for the record, opposed to the Karen Sinclair slaughterhouse on Centerville, but for many reasons, basically on location alone and for the environment. My husband is a fourth generation. His father owned and operated Miller's Market, and he was a butcher. I live across the street from lovely people, Cordes family, and Julian. Several neighbors that are third, fourth, and fifth generation. We collaborated together with the surrounding area to oppose it again for location alone, never against the slaughterhouse. To keep my word, I have then since looked for locations. I went to the Bentley family and Park family. I went to Silver State Industries, and they were also interested. COVID kind of shut that down. Looked at former dairies. I'm just here to say that it's not as easy as like to find a place for a great location. In looking at this project, I was thoroughly impressed with, first of all, I thought it would be a great area. I was concerned coming here not knowing about where the effluent would go. Again, I just want to say I'm impressed with the time and effort that they've taken. I want to thank the Park family for bringing this to the committee. I believe that it's going to benefit the rancher, and as the gal said, 4-H, FFA, the local hunter. It's more humane for the animal to be this close, and also hats off to the Temple Grandin. Not required, but it just goes to show that I think he's went above and beyond to make this good for the animal and good for the rancher. And let's see what else. And as for the area, again, not on a floodplain. You got 24 feet for this thing to percolate versus 24 inches. I think it's a win-win, whether it's the system or if it were to be hooked in. But again, you need to treat it before it's even hooked in as well. The denitrification system, again, I don't even believe that's required, but hats off to go above and beyond. It actually treats it before you even send it to be treated. So it's it was a definite need. For the Centerville, it wasn't even actually going to fix that process. But again, I just want to thank him for, and like I said, it's not an easy way to look in this valley if it's going to be anywhere. I don't know of another area, and I just really, encourage you to support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other public comments?
For the record, my name, I got to bring it down a little bit here. My name is Carol Bennis, and I like to joke and say I've been a newcomer because I've only lived here 49 years, but I do realize the value of this valley, and I know the Parks family, and I know their values and what they have done. They haven't taken the easy road many times, and they could have made more profits, but instead they chose the ethical way to go. And I did oppose the Sinclair project because that I felt it was on the watershed for the Carson River, and the Carson River is the only river that flows east, west of the Continental Divide. All the other rivers flow into the ocean. That is a prized river, and we really, anyway, why did people move here? They moved here because of the agricultural environment. They wanted to get away from the heavy city life. They wanted to raise their children in an agricultural environment. And in order to sustain this agricultural environment, we need the facility of a slaughterhouse. And the park option, I think, is an excellent one because we've got 4-H, we've got FFA. We want to continue to make this an agricultural and residential area. The people before us have always kept that in mind when they have voted for any type of property like this. Anyway, I'm not used to public speaking, I'm sure you can tell, but I just wanted to say, please, please consider this option because it's very, very much needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment?
My name is Dave Benjamin, and I'd like to say it's great that we don't have a 4-hour meeting getting ready to go here. It's pretty clear that the valley needs additional meat processing capabilities. And I think this is a pretty good site. If there are economic impacts, parks are going to experience them. It's not going to go out to a big part of the community. Unlike Sinclair, there's not a house across the road. There's not water wells nearby that are potentially going to be impacted. So this is a much better location than Sinclair ever was. There is one remaining issue, though, I still think, and I think it should be discussed. We're still in a floodplain at this location because of Buckeye Creek, and they're still disposing of the waste into the ground. If the sewer's close, I think that this becomes a slam dunk if they attach to the sewer, but I think that's one of the considerations that really needs to be explored is connecting to the sewer. Otherwise, I think this is as good a location as you're probably going to find. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? Seeing no additional public comment, we'll come back to the Planning Commission, and if the staff or the applicant would want to address any of the questions that were raised in public comment, we'll start with that, and then either move it back to the Planning Commission or go in another direction. Dave, if you'd like to start, state your name and then make responses as needed.
Yeah, sure. For the record, Dave Lundergreen. So the first one I took down the note was the smell. Part of the whole reason that we contemplated the fully indoor processing facility was that reason alone. You know, the whole process is completely inside. We believe the smell is mitigated already by that, and we just feel like it's a non-factor. I understand concerns about it, but I really believe that it's just not going to happen. You know, that's already a cattle operation. There could be 500 cattle standing out in the field around those properties at any time. So we just don't feel that you know, it's a concern. Let me see. So, as far as the traffic, you know, Buckeye is a collector already, and so we were kind of thinking about that, talking about that, and Dave has cattle trucks that go out of there now. He has to haul his cattle out of there to truck them somewhere else, you know, and his hay trucks, farm equipment. The impact of the traffic is basically a push, in our opinion, because of what won't have to happen there. So we kind of feel that way. As far as the floodplain, just want to make clear, we're not doing any work in the floodplain. There's floodplain around it, but there's none. Where our proposed work is, there's no floodplain.
Well, in regards to the floodplain, so all over the valley we have standard septic systems, some with denitrification systems, some without, some in floodplains, some without. This is not a mounded system, so it's not. The water's going to flow over the system just like in a standard septic system, and then for almost 2,000 feet to the west is the Park Ranch fields. If with proper monitoring and documentation through inspections, which NDEP is going to require of us, whether it's quarterly or annually or whatever. Dave doesn't want toxic waters going into his fields, and so as far as the floodplain affecting that in this location, I don't believe that's going to be a problem. Smell, if you're worried about the smell, I would encourage you to go up to Wolfpack Meats, tour the facility. I thought for sure that there would be an odor, but if you keep a clean facility, those animals are there for a relatively short amount of time, and again, with a clean facility, odor's not gonna accumulate. We're removing the waste on a periodic basis. Oftentimes with waste that's even in an underground tank, if left there long enough, it can emit smell. But if we remove it often enough, and I don't think we're going to have any problems with the smell. Again, I mean, 1,300 feet to the road, couple thousand feet to the west, nobody. And winds are primarily west to east, and south, southwest to northeast. If there's not a lot of smell right at the location, I can't see that there's going to be anything that far away.
One last comment. I understand people's concerns about the effluent on site, and I really don't have a concern about that. We believe we've addressed it. We also use the majority of MGSD's effluent for irrigation on our ranch over near Muller Lane. So we're familiar of what it can do to our property and how to handle it. We monitor it and with wells, and so we're familiar with it, and I really don't have a concern about what we're proposing over on Buckeye Road.
Thank you very much. Did the staff have any additional points that they wanted to make in response to public comment or on other issues? Please go ahead.
Yep, thanks, Chairman. This is Jeremy Hutchings, Douglas County Engineer for the record. And just to point out, I think Mr. Meyer had the question about the sewer. The code under development standards for 20.100.050 actually requires connection for new development to sewer and water when you're within 2,000 feet. So the code actually requires it, and Lorenzo has some language here that we would like to add to the condition. This is a little bit interesting project because for the sewer facility is not within the service area, so they'd have to request annexation or an out-of-service area contract with MGSD, and I think they are in the town of Minden's service area. So the way the condition could be is to add it to connect to public sewer. Then the backup would be if annexation was refused by MGSD, then they could approach the state for a commercial system as what they're proposing. But our recommendation from engineering is based on this code section. The exemption is if you're over 2,000 feet away from a public sewer. And the gray area is that the project currently that property is not annexed to MGSD, so they'd have to file for annexation with MGSD. Staff has contacted Pete at Pete Barab, I forget his last name, at MGSD. There is a commercial application they could fill out, but he seemed willing to accept it. It would likely require the same pre-treatment that Gary's actually already designed as far as settling out the fats before entering the system. But it wouldn't be something they would, he said it'd be something they'd certainly consider. So I'm happy to answer any further clarifications. It may seem like a hardship, more because of the distance to the park's office is about 1,500 feet. But again, if you just look at the straight up code, the code cutoff is within 2,000 feet, and the project and the property both fall within that. Historically, I think the property boundary is considered the distance that you measure the 2,000 feet from. But in either case here, it does not seem to fall within that exception. I'm happy to answer any further questions. And again, Lorenzo has a couple of draft conditions that, engineering would like to add. That's.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. If I can just do a brief summarization, and then Dave, if you have comments that you wanted to make. So basically what you're saying is the presentation that Lorenzo made when he talked about water and sewer is what you were just summarizing, the requirement in code that if they're less than 2,000 feet, greater than 2,000 feet to connect.
If they're greater than 2,000 feet, they meet the exception to not connect.
Okay,
and
right.
They can do the septic.
Yes, and they're at 1,500. And you have conditions that you have brought forward that we can examine. Have you discussed these with the applicant previously, or is this something we need to kind of work on the fly on?
Yeah, very briefly, I don't know if we got the conditions in front of the applicant. I did talk to Mr. Lundergreen briefly about the cutoff on the code last night, and I apologize. That's something I should have done previously. It's just something, frankly, that I'd missed and wish I'd gotten to sooner.
Thank you. We appreciate your bringing it to our attention now. Dave, do you want to make a short response now, and then do you need a short recess to review this further? Or,
Yes, both of those.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Please
Thank
go
you.
ahead and provide your comments.
So
and
we
then
read the same section. We did check originally, and we believed that we were outside of the service area because there also is an exception that says this may include but not limit to requirement for installation of sewer laterals dry within the project or requirement of a connection when located within 330 feet of an existing sewer line. The property does abut Buckeye Road, but the structure is 1,500 feet away. So we understand, with all due respect, Jeremy's, thoughts on this, but I guess we better have a recess first so we can talk about it.
Fine. Let's take a 15-minute recess so that provide adequate time to at least explore the idea. We'll come back at 25 after 4, and then we'll resume consideration of this matter. Thank you. We'll be in recess till 4:25.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.
If we could have everybody take your seats and we'll resume the meeting. I'll call the meeting back to order. It's about 4:26. We were discussing item number 2, and the staff has some additional comments that they'd like to make relating to water and sewer. Christy, can I confirm that you're still with us so we have all 7 members?
Yes, confirming I'm still on.
Thank you very much for your patience on this. So what we'll do now is we'll talk to staff about the recommended conditions that they would like to suggest, and then we'll hear from the applicant, and then we can discuss where we need to go after that. So Lorenzo or Jeremy, if you'd like to proceed with comments, and then we'll move it to the applicant.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy Hutchings, again for the record. I think just to clarify a couple things after talking with the applicant, who obviously has some concern with the condition, they point out, hey, we think it's 330 feet away from the sewer line. But actually, the way I read the code is if you're within 2,000 feet, you connect, and if you're greater than that, you can get a provision there, and that's where that applies to put in like dry sewer lines and such. The conditions that we would suggest are simply, we could, my engineer did write up a standard condition, but it could be as simple as, you know, connect to sewer, and the same applies for water and connect to water. That is just simply what's in the development code. If we're going to vary for that, they could apply for that variance for a hardship waiver because the proximity of the actual project being quite a ways away from the sewer main, but again, the project itself is still within that 2,000 feet. And I think what our legal counsel would say is typically that 2,000 feet is measured to the property line, and the sewer is in front of the property line, so is the water. And I believe they do have an on-site system for fire suppression anyway, which the additional, I think the building's sprinkler today, and I think that would just have to get extended anyway, so the water is technically on site. So the conditions we could add would be simply to connect to public sewer and water. And again, if the annexation with the sewer district didn't proceed, the fallback could be that they could get the state system approved through the state, which would be a commercial system. Hopefully that answers the question. I know the applicant's going to want to respond. Obviously, they're not going to want to agree to that offhand.
Thank you, Jeremy. Dave, go ahead with comments that you might have.
Okay, yeah. Well, I guess maybe we would like the district attorney to maybe weigh in on that. Section 2100.050, exemption B. We did do some due diligence, and we made a few phone calls. Of course, we don't have any documentation of that, but and we were definitely working under the impression of 330 feet to the project. So, you know, you have the property line, and obviously the acreage abuts Buckeye Road. Nobody's going to argue that, but the project itself is, you know, around 1,500 feet. The sewer lateral might even be longer than, it might even be over 2,000 feet. So I guess the question might be, you know, once we go out the back of that building, what's going to be the total developed length of that sewer line? It might be over 2,000 feet. We don't actually have that number. So those are a couple of arguments that we want to talk about. And then, you know, the other one that just kind of got slipped in is connect to water. Well, it sounds all great, but, you know, that's a pretty, connection fees are very extensive. And we're talking about a couple $100,000 here probably for connection permits for water and sewer. So if we feel if we have the right to be exempt from that, we certainly want to pursue that. So I think we might want to ask Sam for his interpretation. Sam T. Sorry, Sam.
Thank you, Dave. Sam Taylor, can you weigh in? And I think we might have a request for reviewing the exact language in code. I'm not sure if that can be displayed to us or read to us, so the Planning Commission can hear that as well. But Sam Taylor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sam Taylor on behalf of Douglas County DAs. I will take the liberty of reading the code provision into the record. 2100.050B states in relevant part, in areas where a public wastewater system is anticipated, just want to note here, it's not only anticipated, but the wastewater system is right in front of the property, but not located within 2,000 feet, development may utilize ISDS, that's individual sewage disposal system, on an interim basis upon approval by the department. So essentially what that means is if your project is not within 2,000 feet, you can otherwise be exempt. But if you are within 2,000 feet, then your project unfortunately is not exempt. The question then becomes, and I spoke to Jeremy about this and asked him, and he was quite adamant that he said the project was within definitively the 2,000 feet. In fact, I think earlier the applicant themselves said it was within 1,500 feet. So obviously it falls within the boundary that the individual sewer disposal system is not authorized, and whereas mandatory connection to the sewer system is required. So I would also note that I tend to agree with Jeremy's interpretation of the code relative to the dry sewer lines. What you're required to do is, and I think the whole purpose of this section is, that if you're outside the 2,000 feet, you're required to put in, and it says right here, as a condition, the development must make provisions for the ultimate connection of the project to a public wastewater system. Okay, this may include but not be limited to requirement for installation of sewer laterals, dry sewer lines within the project, or requirement of connection when located within 330 feet of an existing sewer line. In both cases, both the 2,000 feet and also I would say the 330-foot designation, that would go to the property line. Because what you don't want to do is get in an argument with the developer where the project begins and ends in terms of where they're developing on the individual property or lot. So whenever you have these code provisions, I mean, mandatory connection is usually within X amount of feet to the property line. And it isn't just here, it's other jurisdictions that I've looked at as well and been involved in. So it would be my opinion that they would be required to connect to the wastewater system unless they attain a formal sort of variance, and you can get a variance to development standards. And so they could ask the commission for a variance, but they'd have to file the separate application for that. This application, I'm not sure it can be postponed. How long they have? Yeah. Yeah, we can do it to a date certain, but I think you got a certain number of days, right? You can postpone. So you'd have to, I mean, the applicant would have to hustle, in essence, is what I'm trying to get at, to get their variance request in so that it could be done in time and that this, the postponement would be heard within that period. So, anything else?
I think that's helpful right now. I think perhaps Dave or Dave Park, if you can react to Sam's interpretation of code. He's also raised the question of going the variance route. If we could get your observations on that, and then maybe at that point, after you've had one more chance to respond, we can come back to the Planning Commission members and see what the preference of the Planning Commission members. Obviously, we'd like to have a general agreement so that all parties are satisfied, but if not, then I think the Planning Commission can weigh in as to which direction we believe is the most favorable for all parties. So Dave and Dave Park, the floor is yours for comments that you wanted to make.
I think the only point we were kind of outside talking about it, on the front porch, and it's kind of interesting because we still have to pre-treat it. So we're still going to have to put this elaborate pretreatment system in, and then we're going to discharge the water, which is basically domestic waste at that point, into the sewer. We're probably going to have to do a lift station. It's going to be a pretty significant expense. Of course, that's not always factored into anything. And we're going to send it to MGSD. They process it, then they send it over to their ponds on Muller Lane, which then Dave Park irrigates his property with that same water. And he has to buy it back, and he has to pay for it. So it's super hard for us to stomach, I guess is what I would say, and so we would like to explore our avenues, but we certainly want to move forward with this facility. So,
Mr. Chair, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Pays MGSD for that water.
Yeah, so then that water, the pretreatment, I mean, so it's, we can't argue that all here right now, obviously. So, I don't know if you guys want to say anything else, or maybe we might need just a quick recess again for like 5 minutes whether we want to agree to those conditions or not, if that's where we're headed.
Let's let Sam Taylor make a quick response, and then if a member of the Planning Commission or two wanted to interject some thoughts, that might help you folks get your ducks in a row. Okay. Sam Taylor, and then I'll bring it back to comments from the Planning Commission.
Yep, sorry, just I wanted to point out there may be another avenue or two that could maybe accommodate Mr. Park. One avenue is that potentially the board could approve this with the condition of sewer, connect to sewer and water, and then subsequent to that, Mr. Park could then come back and ask for a variance from that condition. So in other words, he could get the approval today and kind of keep sort of moving forward, but knowing he would be subject to coming back for that condition. Also, just one thing to point out, that the developer can waive the timeframes within the code, so he has the ability to put this on hold for as long as he needs to in order to obtain his variance. So I thought I'd point that out as well.
Thank you very much, Sam Taylor. And members of the Planning Commission that have comments or want to suggest directions or ideas, Nick, please go ahead, and then Brian, you're after that.
This is directed to Sam Taylor. Is there a requirement that they hook up to water as well as sewer, or is it just sewer?
Yes, Sam Taylor again for the record, Douglas County DAs. Yes, it's 2100-040 requires connection to the water as well. It's pretty much the same language.
Thank you.
But the thing about it is, and this is something else I want to point out to Mr. Park. I mean, I worked for a water utility previously. If somebody was already connected, then in other words, they already had a connection for whatever purpose, we wouldn't require them to pay, an impact fee, because you already are connected to the system, and you're already, basically, the impact for your connection has already been taken into account. Now, I'm not sure what Minden does, but I'm just saying that might be something they could explore.
Thank you, Sam. Brian.
So my question relates again back to this code that we're interpreting at 2000, Sam's over here. I seem to remember a property over on East Valley. When we're looking at the wording of this sentence, we keep saying project development. The building's there. We're not developing anything, I feel like. When I'm reading in development, I'm thinking, the 160 houses in the ranchos, and there's a shared costs amongst all the people. We're looking at, as a county, requiring a single individual to spend, an exorbitant amount of money for them to give the county the water to take it back. I mean, I'm looking at a grim view of the county, because that's typically how I take it as an accountant who doesn't like taxes. But when I'm looking at it, is we're going to require somebody to give us something to take it back. And in the middle, there is a payment that is made to one of those county agencies. And so I have a direct problem if we're considering that a project and a development is a single property owner. And if we put this line through and there was somebody else that already existed on that line, are they also required to connect no matter what, just because we put a line there and their house already existed and they weren't previously connected? And do we cause that person to pay all the money to make the connection? So I just want to kind of clarify, where did the 330 go when we were talking about those East Valley homes? We had a connection that was right around, I think it was close to 500 feet or 330 feet, something like that was very close, and we had required them, had they been within a 330, to connect. And so I'm wondering why a single individual could be forced to go through this type of expense when they're not even changing the building or anything existing on the property other than the use. We're considering a special use permit, not a development application.
Mr. Chair, I believe I can answer that as well.
Sam Taylor or Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, Sam Taylor again for the record, Douglas County DAs. Yeah, I actually considered that as well, Brian, whenever I started looking into this issue and became aware of it earlier today in this meeting. I did not know there was a sewer line in front of the property. So I looked at it, and I also looked at the definition of development, which includes basically any construction, reconstruction, demolition, or alteration of the size of any building, any facility, including any private or municipal facility. So that's where this comes from. So it's required, and if you look at 2100-050, it says new development. So this is development. This is new development under our code. In other words, if you're doing something other than just repairing your existing building, you are in the new development territory.
Thank you very much. Bryce, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did I understand correctly that that the variance is something that as a body we can debate today, or are we going to have to renotice that for a future date?
Sam Taylor again for the record. The variance would they have to file an application with the Community Development Department for a variance, and that would be processed the same as any, in fact, it'd be processed the same as the variance you heard earlier today. So this, like I said, you could approve their development application subject to connection to water and sewer, and then they could later come back and ask for the variance at a later date. But they would have to process that separately, pay the fee and all that, what have you.
Okay, thank you. I just think it's unfortunate for the applicant that this issue was raised, long into the debate today, and I'm hopeful that there's some way that we can address this. And it doesn't sound like we have a whole lot of options this afternoon, but it's just unfortunate.
Thank you, Bryce. Brian, Mark, you want to go ahead first, and then we'll come back to Brian?
So my question is for Sam Taylor as well. So if they're not annexed into the service area, then they don't get service. So what would stop them from saying, I never want to be annexed in? Isn't it their choice?
Are you talking about annexation in general? Service area. Okay. Sam Taylor again for the record, Douglas County DA. Annexation in the service area is up to Minden-Gardnerville. So that's what Jeremy was referring to earlier. In other words, if Minden-Gardnerville decided that they would not provide service to that location, then the only alternative that Mr. Park would have would be the system that he proposed, which is the ISDS with the D-Night, so the commercial facility.
So Sam, is that a decision that Minden-Gardnerville gets to make, or is that decision that the applicant can decide whether or not he wants to annex in?
Well, because they're required to connect to the public system, I think at a minimum they should at least provide proof that they've attempted to obtain service from Minden-Gardnerville and been denied that service formally. And if they were denied that service, then we could consider the ISDS.
Thank you.
Brian, did you have another quick question?
Well, and, back to the point of, the water and all of those things. I mean, David Park himself, I believe, has enough water for the property. And like I'm saying, when we send something to somebody and there's a payment in between, me as an individual have a real trouble with somebody paying to get something back from themselves and sitting on a board and requiring something that does require that. Now, we're talking about a sewer line that is already in existence close to the property, but where is it going? I mean, why do we have a sewer line that goes where the sewer district doesn't go? I mean, somebody here please explain that one, because had we not put a line where it shouldn't be, it doesn't seem like this would ever be annexed in. So somebody please provide why we have a line going there.
Jeremy, go ahead.
Sewer runs to, Jeremy Hutchings for the record again. Mr. Rowland, the sewer runs out to the Science Park for Bentley and the development around Orbit, and then it runs back to the plant.
That's annexed in?
Right. So if you look at an annexation, it's not, sometimes you get either little islands that aren't, or just little pockets that aren't. It's not all just like you might think it's nice rectangles or something. So there's parcels here or there that are in, some are not, this one's not.
In my analysis, it's possible that the hardship was placed upon somebody by somebody else. Thank you.
Yeah, potentially. This one's just unfortunate just because of the way Mr. Parks got his structure. It is a bit far away from the existing sewer, but it is right adjacent to it. And the way Sam is interpreting the code, I think he's me telling the engineer and telling the lawyer how to interpret the code, but that is the way it reads. And it's in that Mr. Nendrip had asked about, well, is it their choice to annex in or not? That's the annexation part's not really in it. It's just where the sewer's located. And it's public sewer, and it's just a little unfortunate, odd situation that we find ourselves in this one.
Bryce, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if Mr. Park would have known when he built that building, whenever that was, he's got a couple acres over there, that if he would have just built it 600 feet further to the north, we wouldn't be having this conversation, correct?
No, I think Mr. Klutz, no, I think what Sam Taylor would say is the definition of where your proximity to the sewer is based on your parcel, not the actual development itself. So it's 2,000 feet from your parcel to the sewer, to that utility. that might seem like a strict interpretation, but that's probably, I believe, to be a correct interpretation. So even if he'd pushed that building further north, 400 or 500 feet, we would still be having this conversation.
Let's go to Mark and then Lorenzo, if you have another comment. Then I'd like to try and bring this to a conclusion where we can either have action or move in the direction that the applicant would like to move.
So, Jeremy, this is a question for you. So if the applicant, if there was a spite strip there, the 6-foot spite strip that we heard at the last meeting, or if David simply did a lot line adjustment to put 6 feet into a different parcel, would we be having this discussion?
You'd have to put 2,000 feet in between the parcel, Mark. It's the parcel line to the sewer. So right now, his frontage is, the sewer's in the right-of-way on Buckeye. His parcel fronts Buckeye. So that spite strip would have to be 2,000 feet wide. It'd be a heck of a spite strip.
Okay, thank you.
Maureen, if you have a question, go ahead.
I do. In the recommended motion, I agree we need to wrap this up and get moving. It says the applicant's variance justification. And for the life of me, I don't recall any discussion about any variance justification.
Yeah, we didn't, we aren't, at this point, we weren't asking for any variances, you know,
Okay.
in this project at all.
So when I make the motion, because that was the recommendation, go ahead and approve this, and then you could work on your variance request, correct?
Yeah,
if they would choose to go in that direction. But go ahead, Dave.
that's where you
At
wanna
this
go.
point, you know, we could stand here and argue about it all day. We definitely want you to vote on it today. And so if the only way we can get you to vote on it is put those conditions in there, then we would appreciate you to vote on it, so we know where we stand. And then, of course, we do have the option to come back and ask for forgiveness on those. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, you know, that'll be something we have to discuss. And maybe we'll just move forward with it once we do a little bit of due diligence to see what it's going to involve actually, because we haven't spoken to MGSD or Town of Minden, you know, as far as. So we would like you to vote on it for sure today. And if the only way that that can happen is with those conditions by engineering, then we would be okay with that.
I'm going to go ahead.
Okay, if I can then restate where I think we're at, and if you don't need to take a further recess to discuss anything, I think the staff has brought forward conditions of approval, and we can have those read into the record. Then the motion would not, at this point, deal with the applicant's variance, but instead would the recommended motion would include the recommended conditions of approval that Lorenzo will read into the record now. So my suggestion would be we go forward with hearing what the recommended conditions are. If we need to discuss those or ask questions of those, then we could do that. And I believe the applicant has been provided with a copy of those recommended conditions, so we're not hitting them with anything blind. They have seen it now. They haven't seen it previously. And again, I apologize on behalf of the Planning Commission that we're kind of doing some of this on the fly, which I do not always like to do, but I do want to take the applicant's request that we move forward on this one way or the other at this meeting today. So let's hear the recommended conditions, then we can ask questions or discuss those. I believe we've already had public comment, so we don't need to go back to public comment on this issue. And then if we can come to a decision on a recommended motion and take action on that, that would be where we need to go for the day. So Lorenzo, I'll turn it over to you with reading the recommended conditions of the record, and then we'll go forward.
Thank you, Chairman Walter. Lorenzo Messina with Douglas County Planning for the record. I want to mention again that this is a request for a special use permit that, if approved, would have the applicant would have to go through building permits, site improvement permits to actually get the operation going. As posted in the agenda currently, there's no condition about connecting to sewer and water. I'm about to read a condition that I believe this commission may revise to add to the staff report as the conditions. Or I believe that this body, and I'm going to defer to the DA's office, may decide not to add that condition to the report as was posted in the agenda. However, staff believes that a condition to provide the applicant time to discuss, even with the MGSD, and provide letters or other information, cost estimates. So in short, a condition that would satisfy everyone at this time could be to add an amended condition in the section A, which are the conditions to be satisfied at the time of a site improvement permit or building permit. And that would be that the applicant shall connect to public sewer and water, or obtain the approval of a variance per Douglas County Code, and that would be the condition. If the applicant at the time of a site improvement permit or building permit would decide not to connect to public water and sewer, that decision would be made by the Planning Commission through the approval of a variance in the future, prior to the building permits being pulled for the actual development. But that would allow the special use permit and the use to still be entitled on the land, and then would devolve the technical matters for the wastewater and the water to a better evaluation from the applicant, the sanitation district, engineering and planning divisions.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Lorenzo. Go ahead, Sam Taylor.
I would add, Sam Taylor again for the record, Douglas County DA, I would add one more maybe sentence to that condition, and I would say something to the fact that in the event applicant approaches MGSD and MGSD provides a letter indicating that they will refuse service to that area or annexation, that their project would be approved as otherwise noted.
Okay, thank you, Sam. And these would be conditions of approval that if you look at packet page 143, we already have conditions of approval, the planning division conditions A and B that move over to page 144 and continue on to 145 with B7. So this would be a new one that would follow on with those. So if I can get the members of the Planning Commission to understand that is the recommendation by staff, so that would be the recommended motion, striking the language on variance and including the additional condition as outlined by Lorenzo and amended by Sam Taylor. Is that relatively clear for the members who will need to make a decision on this? And would they like to ask any questions of staff at this point, or are we prepared to go to a motion? Maureen.
I think I got it. I want to make a motion to approve development application DP 21-0078, a special use permit to allow a 9,320 square foot commercial meat and poultry processing facility based on the ability to make the required findings, presentation, and public comments subject to recommended commissions of approval A and B and recommendations as read into the record. And
thank you, Maureen. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mark seconds the motion. We have a motion and a second to approve the development application. Is there discussion? Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been a long time getting to this point, but I want to say that I appreciate Mr. Park for taking the right steps to bring this facility to our valley and do it in a way that respects the environment in our community. I too have children that have been in 4-H and FFA, and one more that's on the way to doing it. Our family processes its own meat and big game, and it's pretty frustrating to live in probably one of the most beautiful agricultural valleys, at least in the western United States, and have to drive to Reno or Fallon to have this done. So thank you for doing it in the right way and for bringing this to our valley, and hopefully we can get some of this other stuff resolved.
Thank you, Bryce. The other members of the Planning Commission for a discussion or debate on the motion? Brian? Mark?
I too would like to thank Mr. Park for bringing this forward. We need to do all we can to help the ranchers in Carson Valley stay in business. I believe that a facility like this would help slow down the conversion from ranch land into houses.
Brian?
So I too appreciate David and this team for actually sitting in on the other meeting, listening to the concerns that everybody had, and addressing as many of those concerns in the proper way. I mean, going above and beyond what the project that we saw last time and some experimental, as somebody put it, system, you guys really looked at what we said and made it better. When we look at projects and how we bring them forward, when we deny something, it's not because we don't like the project. There's obviously something about the project we liked. That's why it's here in the first place. I mean, look at the goals and things that we created in this master plan. Agriculture, ranching is all throughout that thing. Like Mark said, if we want to stop the conversion of land, the guy's got to be able to take the cattle to this facility and not have to drive it to Fallon and not have to drive it to Reno. Personally, I worked on Gregg in Reno. I lived on South McCarran. I drove by Wolfpack Meats 5 days a week, and I can tell you I never smelled a thing. And I mean, that place is right on a river. We're complaining about the Carson River, and we made those arguments last time. It's moot now. And we're not near a river. The smell is not going to be anywhere within anybody's reason. And even if Wolfpack Meats is right next to the road and you can't smell it, I doubt that 1,800 feet away we're going to have a smelling there. The one thing I am kind of disappointed is that on Friday at 2 o'clock we talked about this, 330 feet. And then today we come forward 2,000. We talked about this on Friday. Yesterday was Monday. Why today? County staff, this is 2 projects today that I'm kind of disappointed in, that I can't agree with a lot of what we've said and the background research that we've done because it feels so thrown together. And we're sitting in a room and having to do things on the fly. It is not fair to our applicants at all. And to throw this condition on them the way we did today, I don't like it at all.
Thank you, Brian. Other comments from the Planning Commission members? Christy, anything you wanted to add on your end?
No, I'd say the rest of the planning commissioners addressed every detail.
Thank you very much. I want to just echo Brian's comments in all respects, in the ones of Bryce and Mark too. I do find that it does meet all of the findings. I did vote against the previous project because I thought it endangered and jeopardized the health, safety, and welfare of surrounding properties, but I do not believe this project does. So therefore, I would be supporting this motion. And if there's no further discussion from members of the planning commission, Maureen.
I like the other one. I like this one. Thank you for both.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you for your motion, and thank you for your good work. So the question is on Maureen's motion to approve the special use permit. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. So the ayes are 7, the nays are 0, and the motion is approved. Thank you very much. We appreciate everybody's due diligence and patience. We do have closing public comment. At this time, public comment will be taken on those items that are within the jurisdiction and control of the Planning Commission, or those agenda items where public comment has not already been taken. And I would be happy to open it up to anyone in the audience for closing public comment.
Jim Slade.
Before the start of item 2, Chairman Walder reminded everyone of the process to be followed, as always. The chairman would read the agenda item into the record, staff would make their presentation and answer questions. The applicant would make his presentation and answer questions. Then there would be public comment, and then there would be final board discussion and the vote. On item 1, this procedure was not followed. The applicant was allowed unlimited time to make their presentation and answer questions, but then instead of going to public comment, the applicant stepped to the mic to make several more points with no time limit whatsoever, not answering any question posed by any member. In public comment following my 3 minutes, the applicant, Mrs. Rose, stepped to the mic and was allowed unlimited time to express every possible concern that she had. That was inappropriate and contrary to the direction given by the chairman, but he said he wanted to give extra time to the applicant. During the recess in the hallway, the chairman told me that he didn't want to be accused of not allowing the applicant sufficient time. But by being overly generous to the applicant, the Planning Commission is being inconsiderate and unfair to the public, especially those that might oppose the item. You should not be giving unlimited time whenever an applicant wants to speak. In my opinion, the applicant should be given one bite at the apple only, which is the way the board does it, and be given a time limit in advance, as the board and the Planning Commission have done sometimes. On item 2, was it really necessary for Mr. Thurm to read every word of his 17-page presentation? That dragged on interminably and was unnecessary. Then, after public comment, inviting the applicant back up to respond to anything they would like to without limit, or to add additional information that they wanted to without giving the public the opportunity to respond, was also inappropriate. Again, by being overly generous to the applicant to go as long as they want, basically whenever they want, ends up being inconsiderate and unfair to the public, especially those who might oppose any applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? I want to thank the staff for their very good work. Lorenzo, you did an excellent job. We appreciate Jeremy and Sam's good work. All of the people in the clerk's office were extra patient in assisting us today, so thank them as well. I thank my colleagues on the Planning Commission, and we will stand adjourned.
Recording stopped.